So we're going to skip the Pledge of Allegiance tonight. That's one of the things we haven't taken off for our remote meetings, since not everybody has, American flag hanging in whatever meeting room they happen to be using. For chairperson's remarks tonight, I think the biggest thing I want to say is that when we had our last meeting, I keep thinking back to this. When we had our last meeting, we were just having this discussion about canceling out-of-state trips, and I think it was 2 days later, we were literally calling off school and moving to a situation that has now carried us, I think, 3 or 4 weeks into a closure, which is unbelievable, given where we were at our last meeting. So huge sea change. That said, I think there are so many thank yous in order, and I want to just take a little time to mention Lucinda Ward and our food services staff, who are working to make sure that our students that need food are being fed. They're getting breakfasts and lunches 7 days a week if they need it. For some of them, it's being delivered. For others, they're picking up. Deb Jones and the IT staff, who has made sure that our students that need to be connected are connected, whether it's providing Chromebooks. I know they've been, I'm imagining, given what I'm hearing from parents, that they're handling about 7 million help desk tickets a day, making sure
maybe
that
6.5 million.
6.5. Okay.
Yeah,
all right.
Yeah.
Making sure that they can get into every single, app that we have, supporting systems, helping people with logins. I mean, it's just been, that's an unbelievable effort on their part. Definitely our 4 administrators who are on here, who have been working their tails off to get the district up and running in a remote learning environment. All the staff that have been switching from thinking that we would have school on a Monday to directly to enrichment, and then on from there and into a remote learning that has made great strides since Monday. I mean, just the differences that I'm seeing in 3 days as they kind of ramp themselves up into the system is unbelievable. And then finally, all the caregivers and the students that I know are stepping up. This is obviously not their key role. They're juggling jobs in many cases. Some of them have lost jobs and are working on filing for unemployment and trying to cover their employees if they had a small business. And, every day I'm talking to people who it's just, challenges that they're meeting, and they're still working with their students, and their students are still working hard and wanting to do the work and show up and make the connections and just be there, and try and keep their lives as connected with school as possible. And I think it's just amazing. I mean, I can't count how many times over the past few weeks I've just been brought to tears by one thing or another, of people just stepping up, and the amount of love that the students have and the staff have. And it's unbelievable. So thank you to all of them, because again, last month at this meeting, I don't think we ever could have anticipated where we would be today.
Also,
that said, we do have one sad announcement tonight. Former elementary school teacher Joan Flink passed away, and I'm going to turn it over to Brian just so that he can talk a little bit about her, and then we'll have a brief moment of silence.
yeah, thank you. So we don't have a lot of details, but from many that we've spoken to who are connected with her, she actually has a high school age kids. She retired. Joan was with us from 2005. She started and retired from Salisbury Elementary in July of 2016. So she was 3.5 years out into retirement. She was a substitute. I know she was still routinely in the buildings. Those who didn't know her from being a teacher at Salisbury knew her from being a substitute, and also obviously as a mom. So a huge loss, and our heart goes out to her family and her kids, and certainly in our thoughts and prayers.
Okay, if we could have a brief moment of silence. All right, thank you. With that said, we'll get on with tonight's agenda, since I think we're going to have a full one. I'll open it to oral communications from the public. If I can just remind you, you can raise your hand in order to be recognized if you want to speak. All right, seeing none, we are not observing a student of the month tonight due to the closure. And we'll move on to the consent agenda. I'll read aloud the donations. We have a donation of $2,000 from Phoenix RF Technologies LLC for Boys and Girls Tennis Program to be used per the direction of the athletic director and coaches. Thank you to Phoenix RF Technologies LLC. Can I get a motion to approve the consent agenda? Brian, you're going to have to unmute some school committee members here.
We can unmute ourselves, right?
Perfect.
You can unmute yourselves. Yep.
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Can I get a second?
I'll second.
Was that Aaron?
Oh, it was Tina. This
Oh,
is
Tina?
Hannah.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'll second that.
Thank you. Any further discussion? All right, all in favor? Yeah. All right, looks unanimous. Okay. Kaylee has been kind enough to join us for the student advisory report. So I will turn it over to you, and thank you very much for coming on tonight, Kaylee, because I'm sure that this has been as much of a transition for you
Excuse me.
Yes.
Are we supposed
sorry,
to
Deb.
are we supposed to have roll? I couldn't unmute myself fast
Oh,
enough.
you're right.
Roll
Sorry.
call
Thank you
vote.
for reminding me of that. Yeah, we do need a roll call vote. I forgot about that. So we'll do a roll call vote on the consent agenda and go back to that. So let me go just in
Yes.
order. Deb, Tina,
Yes,
she's
yes.
saying yes. I can see her saying yes. Maureen,
Yes.
Aaron,
Yes.
Paul Goldner. He's saying yes. Dina?
Yes.
Yep. Paul Lees is a yes. Linda?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. All right. So now moving back on to you, Kaylee. Thank you for spending the night with us tonight. I know this is probably a first for the Triton Regional School Committee, I would have to say, having a remote student advisory report. So congratulations on being the first.
Thank you.
Rough situation. So I will turn it over to you for the student advisory report.
Hi. Hello, everyone. Well, I know this month's report won't exactly follow the typical formatting that I use, but quite frankly, nothing tonight or in the past month has been typical, normal, or even somewhat resembling average. With this in mind, I'd like to bring up something I had mentioned in the first meeting of this year. When I had said the 20s are back, and while it does bring interesting opportunities, the unpredictable change is readily anticipated, I did not mean the opportunity to figure out how new technical platforms work and to test how many people they can hold. I did not mean the unpredictable change of the world as we know it being completely turned upside down was being readily anticipated. And yet, that's where we are today. A world where people are claiming rooms in their houses for conferences and classes. A world where people look forward to what formerly were regarded as mundane tasks, simply because it means they can get out of the house. Everyone has admitted that they don't have even the clue as to what the future holds anymore. This is the world that we are all living in. No one pretends that it isn't taking a toll, but I'm here tonight to present the toll that it's taking on our student body. A toll that admits to the insanity, confusion, and uncertainty of the world isn't being acknowledged as much as it probably should be. I would have never thought that instead of listening to the murmurs of the halls all month, I would be listening to the quiet ticking clock in the other room. This month, the will and worries of the students have reached me not through side talk in classes, but instead social media pages, Google Classrooms, emails, and the occasional fear that bubbles up during Zoom calls. We all know that barely anything is certain right now, but even possible options and opinions are more helpful than we care to admit. That is why I ask, with the voice of the students behind me, that we will be informed in the possible decisions that are being made, or even just the options. We feel as though this information going out to the student body would help ease the fear. In a class last week, it came to my attention that not just myself, but the majority of my classmates aren't not receiving any information regarding the closure or online learning process or outlines from the administration in emails. We do know, though, that our parents are, but we feel as though there is a disconnect between administration and the students ourselves. We ask that the ability for us to be included in these, or something similar, be considered. One of the lessons high school has taught us so far is to use as much information and factual evidence as possible to form independent thought. These additional emails and information going out to the student body would definitely help. We know that there is the Stay Connected page, but we'd prefer access to the most information as possible. Another large concern is April break. I know that it seems quite arbitrary at this point in time when we really can't go anywhere, but it's in our minds. We haven't heard any concrete information on this topic, and it's left a lot of questions. First off, are we even still having it? If not, will we be getting out of school earlier for the year? Or did the period of time where teachers were sending out enrichment work count as our break? I can tell you from the point of honor students, they aren't exactly the largest fan of the idea, especially if it won't change the end date. Just because some students weren't doing enrichment work doesn't mean that everyone will lose what would have been our break. It's a stressful time in all of our lives, and some would welcome the time to consider where to go from here without being bombarded by constant notifications from teachers. However, on the flip side, there is the point that we have just started to get back into a rhythm when it comes to academics. And then the final looming question, which clearly none of us know at this point in time, is what is to happen with the rest of the year? At this rate, are we even going to be back for the end of the 2019-2020 school year? Or is online just our new normal? With this in mind, are senior weeks and proms still going to be happening if we go back? And even further, next year, are we still going to have snow days? Or are we just going to switch to online for that day? Because clearly we've shown that we can possibly handle it. And I know that I've asked a large majority of the questions tonight, but thank you, and I want to open up the floor to everyone that has any questions for me. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Kaylee. And I guess we can give a quick response on that one first, and I'll defer to Brian on the communications. But yes, there has been a ton of conversation about April vacation. I know it's on everybody's minds, and that is being talked about under general action item A tonight. So if you want to hang around, you are more than welcome to put in your 2 cents. We are talking about the school year calendar is also on there. April vacation and the decision on April vacation will have a direct effect on that, or could potentially have a direct effect on that. We'll also be talking about refunds for tuition-based programs under that action item, and then a couple of financial issues for the district. So as always, I know this is maybe a little bit easier than a general school committee meeting for you to just hang out for the night, but you're welcome on any of these items to express your opinion as our student rep, because you know, that's absolutely something we would encourage. And I wish I could answer your question about when we'll be back. I don't think anybody knows at this point.
No one knows. It's open-ended.
Exactly. So we're waiting to see, just like you're waiting to see. And
Exactly.
I wish there was a different answer, but I mean, you know, May 4th and beyond is all I can tell you.
Fingers crossed.
So I think the communications question is a great one, and I'll defer to Brian on that one.
Yeah, I think I can answer 2 questions, 2 definitive things. The majority I cannot. So with all the unknowns, I can tell you that I love the request about communicating with students directly. Obviously, that's different at the elementary level, but I think including students in our communication, whether that's adding it to the routine communications that comes out from our office or from the high school office, I think that's a very fair request, and I will absolutely work with the principal on that from the high school perspective, and then, you know, with the 4 of us on our communication. So thank you for that suggestion.
Thank you.
In regards to next year and years beyond and snow days, I've had that question so many times. So you remember the discussion about blizzard bags? So
Yes.
actually this year, it was very early this year. It seems like 7 years ago, but it was actually only about 5 months ago. the Department of Education came out and said that blizzard bags or what was the other term? Alternative learning days, I think was the terminology.
Mhm.
They don't meet the standard of education in Massachusetts because we can't provide equitable access to the curriculum for all students. So there's been obviously, given the status of the way things have played out this year, there's been some leeway. And so all of these days that we've been closed are counting.
Yes.
But in the future, for regular snow days, we would not be able to call even a well-structured remote learning day where it's not, we're closing on
Okay.
Monday and we have to have it figured out by Tuesday. But even if something were well thought out, the Department of Ed has said anyone that had that in place, the current school year is the last year that can happen.
Okay.
So snow days will be real. I will still be back there calling them, but it will. The structure will change as far as
Okay.
whether those are allowed.
Thank
So,
you.
And then the other questions about April vacation and all of that, I would love to have your voice if you stick around long enough, or if you need to go and we want to
I'd
bring
love
that
to.
discussion further up in the agenda, however you want to do that. I would love to have your voice on that.
I think
Thank
the
you.
pressing question is, do you have someplace else to be tonight, Kaylee?
Definitely not. I'm here all night.
All right.
And then I know I hadn't mentioned it, but has there been any ruling on MCAS testing for the year yet? I know that was I forgot to include it, but I just
Yeah, no,
realized
great.
when we were sitting here.
Yeah,
Because
great
I know
question.
a lot of the current sophomores a lot of people I've talked to are relying on the John and Abigail Adams scholarship. So
Absolutely. Yep. So the commissioner has made it very clear that there was a federal waiver
yes.
from the U.S. Department of Education that allowed us to waive MCAS testing, or whatever every other state uses. Ours is MCAS. That is then further governed by our legislature in Massachusetts. So
Mhm.
the commissioner has made it very clear he's applied for the waiver. We received the federal waiver, but that also requires legislative action. So I know that's in the works. I don't know where that stands as of today, but in discussions with the commissioner, he fully understands or expects that it will be canceled, if you will, for the year in regards to the accountability piece. As all of those discussions have unfolded, one of the key points is what you raised, in that no student would be missing an opportunity
Okay.
based on anything missed this year. So for example, and that was kind of a global statement, but for example, if someone had the opportunity, so if it was someone's senior year and was needing retakes, we would figure out a way to do that. But for someone who's a sophomore, and then that determines John and Abigail Adams for the following year, there would be a makeup opportunity for that. So in the junior year, there would be the standard opportunity. In my understanding and guess would be that there would be a makeup opportunity within the year again next year before the senior year. So, but that is something they've talked about addressing and making sure that no student misses out on that opportunity. For sure.
Thank
Great
you.
question.
I can double check on it, Brian, but I believe the legislative waiver that put it in the commissioner's hands was in H 4616, which was that bill that passed last week. It was the same one that, yeah.
You are right. Yes. Yep. So so that one that passed. So there's been no further communication from the Department of Ed, but my guess
Okay.
is then that is one step further. You're correct. So
'Cause
that is one step closer.
I know I had heard from you during the student council
Yeah.
Zoom, but I wasn't sure if anything had changed since.
Yeah. Yeah. So that was last week. So that bill hadn't passed, but it did pass late last week. So
Okay.
that is now law. And yes, you are correct, Narissa. So I know that the commissioner just scheduled a Zoom, if that's a thing now. It's not just a software, it's a thing. We're Zooming next Thursday, I believe. And there's several topics. So my guess is that'll be something that's discussed on that call.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Questions for Kaylee? Seeing none. All right, excellent. Thank you for your report, Kaylee. As
Thank you.
always, I appreciate that you have a firm grasp of language, and you almost have a lyrical way of writing. And I think you know, you said many things better tonight than the rest of us could have said. So,
Absolutely.
so I always
Thank you.
appreciate that.
That means a lot. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Moving on. New business. Seeing none. I'll move on to item, let's see, 9, reports and deliberations. Moving on to A, the remote learning plan. Brian?
Yes, so you have the remote learning plan in your packet. And I'm going to ask if Kim's turned into the shark, just so you're aware. If she has bandwidth issues, she turns into a shark. So I think she can still hear us, but if
I'm here.
Kim, oh, she's there, and Dave is still here. So if either of them have things to add, please feel free to jump in. So this plan was required by the Department of Ed. So when the decision was made to extend the closure through May 6th, there was a promise for further guidance about how we would provide instruction during the closure. The first 2 weeks were review, actually first 3 weeks were review and reinforcing skills, and it was optional. As of this Monday, when this remote learning plan went into place, it is no longer optional. And so obviously we continue to have the challenge of providing equitable access to the curriculum for all students. But this plan lays out a very high level 30,000 foot plan in regards to what our expectations will be. And over the course of those bullets onto the first page and going on to the next page, obviously the first thing is continues to be meaningful connections with students. The health and well-being of our students, our staff, our families is absolutely a priority when we're closed for this during the pandemic. We can assume that the capabilities and the abilities of students and families to complete work is varied, because there are folks who have not been impacted at all by the closure, and there are folks who have been incredibly impacted, whether that's parents out of work or now a house full of workers and students trying to fight for bandwidth. Even for a family of 5, they might have 5 computers, but that doesn't mean the bandwidth on your Comcast can handle it. So there are many barriers, and so this isn't just about a student's ability or financial ability. There are so many barriers with this closure, right on down to folks who are fighting the virus and are sick. So the meaningful connections is absolutely the primary focus of this plan. And the second bullet there, the difference here is we're actively seeking students. So in that first phase, we sought students, but students were very able, and I'm sure Kaylee could attest, you could very easily just kind of sink to the sidelines and survive for the first 3 weeks. So now it's an expectation that students are interacting and engaging with teachers. Google Hangouts, Meets, Zoom platforms, one-on-one calls. It's happening in many different ways, but there is a very different change in that we're actively seeking those students who are not engaging. Third bullet there, again, it's now students are expected to participate, and at the middle and high school, and we wrote 6th grade into this expectation. We're grading on a credit, no credit basis, so it's not a standard grade, and we're still working out what that means for the duration. But for example, the 3rd quarter grades for both the middle school and high school, because that would have ended literally the beginning of this week, those grades were determined by the first half of all the grades and work that was assigned and completed by March 13th, which was the final day before we closed. So anything that was, again, assigned and turned in, tests that happened, teachers are giving students opportunities to improve grades. If they were hoping the second half of the quarter, they were going to retake a test or provide, do an extra credit or something. Anything that happened before March 13th, we're allowing students and teachers to continue to work to improve those grades. Anything from the 13th on is changing to strict credit, no credit. So as far as a final determination, working with the middle school and the high school in regards to how we use the first 2.5 quarters to determine the grade, Obviously, that's hard because there are folks who and students who were counting on the second half of the third quarter or the fourth quarter to improve their grade. And we've been making attempts to try and find a way around that, but unfortunately, the equity standard is a challenging one in that we can't have different grading systems for different students. So the credit, no credit is the only way that we can ensure that all students can access the curriculum. Is the Stay Connected web pages were created. There's a district page, and then there's a page for every school. A big shout out to Dan Jewett, who is our, I think we'll call him a Google Ninja, is the right term. He is an absolute Google whiz and set up all those sites for everyone and work with the assistant principals of these schools to get those populated. These, I will say, 3 days into the plan, as Marissa said, day 1 was hard, day 2 was a little easier, day 3 was a little easier. It's a hard thing to change 240 educators from being used to work in the classroom with students to transitioning online. So our goal was to get everything into a single portal that would allow parents very easy access when you have 1, 2, 3, or 4 or 5 kids, having all of that information in one location. There are so many systems that are in use at the elementary level. There are so many learning platforms with Google Class, then as far as student information and true management, you've got Google Classroom and Aspen. So without the ability to just say, okay, let's stop everything you've been doing all year and move it into one platform, the attempt is that the Stay Connected pages become the central place where parents know they can go to find any of the contacts and the information that they need for their students. So it is not perfect, and I think over time there's been access issues when docs are shared in Google Classrooms, but we're working through those, and hopefully every day it's a little better and a little more streamlined for families, because ultimately this is hopefully a learning experience, and we're able to advance students' learning and further enrich the learning that happens for the first 6.5 months of the year. And when everyone's extra stressed out, that doesn't help. So it's a continual work in progress to adapt there. Second bullet on the second page, the weekly plan. So that's actually a change in that we're now posting, hopefully so that parents can plan. The plan for the week is on Monday, and then there are certainly classes where Zooms and Hangouts are scheduled, but there are some suggested schedules as well for families who that's helpful for. But again, a work in progress, in that if you have 3 kids and you end up with Zooms back to back, and it's hard to accommodate. So we're working through that, but the idea is that as of every Monday, families can plan for the week, what's expected, and plan accordingly. The third bullet there talks about what I said already, in that distance learning cannot replicate the classroom. Right, the face-to-face work that's done with our educators, there is no replacing that. So this is an attempt to expand and extend the learning that we did for the first half of the year, for 6 months of the year, and hopefully over the time develop new ways to enrich that learning, not necessarily always looking at a screen or filling out a piece of paper, but some authentic project-based learning. And so I think as time goes on and it gets more comfortable, that will develop as well. And then the final bullet there with sub-bullets, speaking to our special education services and all student support services. So as we said, the special education challenge is significant. Obviously, there are many services that require a face-to-face intervention. Sometimes that's physical. And so that is a very challenging thing to do. So all of our support services, whether special education or guidance or social workers, they're setting up Google Voice numbers, and they're calling kids, and they're finding resources and connecting kids with resources. And as far as special education, David, I don't know if you want to add anything here in regards to the way we've changed our approach to providing services, because it's a very fine line. But Dave's been spending a lot of time working to make sure that we're in line with what the guidance is coming from the Department of Ed.
Yeah, so I would say we've obviously shifted from the enrichment to providing or trying to provide direct services to students. As Brian indicated, it's not going to be the same or at the same level we could do face-to-face. But I'm really proud of the special education staff. They've stepped up. They're having video conferences. They're sending videos. They're sending materials home. Teachers have actually gone and delivered materials to the homes of students that need them. So this week, the goal was to make sure that we're connecting with all families, and then next week we will be moving towards an individual plan for each student that outlines what we're going to do during the school closure in terms of services and so forth. So people have been very creative. There's been a lot of, depending on the teacher's comfortability with technology, but I've seen a lot of people are doing individual Zoom lessons with kids. Special ed teachers are joining classrooms, in terms of with the regular education teacher for co-teaching. So yeah, I'm really proud of the staff and the fact that people have seemed to have rallied around the crisis. We've been holding virtual IEP meetings when we can, which is very difficult given the scheduling. But yeah, I would say I think we're in good shape.
Oh. We lost him. His sound. I'll pick up where he left off. So yeah, I think we are in good shape, and I think it's similar to what I was saying about teachers in general. It's a very hard transition when folks are used to providing a certain level of, similar to a doctor, a certain level of care, and when an educator can't provide that level of service, it's very challenging for that individual. So I know they've been working through that this week and continuing to unpack it. And lots of questions and answers internally with the staff that Dave is managing and meeting with each school and their staff. So thank you for that. So as far as so I should stop and say, are there any questions in regards to what I've shared so far?
Andy?
Did you say someone's name, Narissa?
No, I was asking if there are any
okay.
questions. So I have a few, Brian, since no one else is going to jump in, I guess, at this point. Chromebooks, how are we doing on distributing Chromebooks, and do we have a sufficient supply? Because I'm getting pinged by parents still asking if there are any left, what the process is. So I've been, sending them to email Jim to arrange a pickup per the last email I saw.
Yep.
Can you just give us a kind of rundown on where we're at with that?
So the latest numbers is in the upper 300s, and I will say that because there could have been more handed out today, but we're approaching 400 Chromebooks passed out. We were talking today, and we're approaching the one-to-one initiative Kim was looking to do. So we're not there yet, but so we are working to with our insurer to make sure that the Chromebooks that we pass out are insured. So we've got that in place. And as I said, it's approaching 400 devices, the vast majority to students and families. There are a number that went out to staff, not teachers. Obviously, teachers had their own, but instructional assistants who needed them to complete their work from home. So we've continued to reach out to families and say, there's no qualifier similar to food, to getting meals. Technically, normally those would be things that you'd have to qualify for. There's no qualification process. If you say you need a Chromebook, and you might have 7 devices in your house, but if you have one kiddo who doesn't have a device and needs it, we're loaning them out. So they have a process where all of our equipment is asset tagged, and so when it goes out the door, recording the Chromebook, the asset ID number, and the contact information. There's also a disclaimer and agreement that the parent has to sign when they take that device.
that it is being used for district use, and it is, call it it's a filtered device. So when you log through there, you are logging through filtered content so that we can maintain our SIPA compliance as we're required to do. So we're not running out. There are lots of devices. So I mean, I suppose we could get to a point where we're running out, but my understanding is there's just today we were updating the list for our insurer, and Deb gave them the full list of the whole new batch that Jim has there to pass out, and he still has more to pass out. So at this point, we are still looking good.
Okay, that's great, because I have occasionally gotten the, I have 3 kids, 2 devices. I would really love to get one for my 3rd kid, but I understand there are families that really need them.
Yep.
They don't see their need as being that great. And my reply back to them has always been, if you feel like you need it to get all of your kids to where they need to be, by all means, go ahead and take it, because that's what they're there for.
Yep,
So,
absolutely.
okay. So it's good to hear that we have that. And I guess this is, more of a logistics question, I guess. But I think I keep hearing you say, we want to make sure that we're connected with every child to make sure that nobody's getting kind of lost in the process or disengaged. I think that would probably look very different. I mean, you have classes at the elementary school where there's one teacher that's essentially responsible for their set of kiddos. But what happens at the middle school and the high school where they're, they don't essentially have one teacher that's responsible for them? How does that work to make sure that we're not, I mean, I hear about things ticking up as far as, issues in households and things like that during this time period, and the potential for that. I just want to make sure that we have an adult, a staff member connecting with every child at every grade level within the school. How is that made sure that, how are we making sure that kind of nobody's falling through the cracks at those higher levels where they don't really, there's not that one teacher, one child relationship that's happening at the elementaries.
It's easy to hide, right? At the middle and high school, it's easy to hide. So I'll invite, I know Kim was chatting with the principals about this, and I'll certainly defer to her if there's information that has changed. But I know our adjustment counselors, so the basic rule has been, if you're not hearing from someone, please contact the principal. And then the principal is coordinating with the guidance department at the high school, social workers, same thing for the middle school. At the middle school, it's a little, they have a home room connection, so there is something there. At the high school, it's obviously very different. So we certainly, all of the students who we will say are already on the radar are absolutely are probably sick of some of the people reaching out to them, finding them, leaving things on their doorstep. So there's certainly a process in place. And I don't know if Kim, if you want to add anything, because I know this was something you were chatting with them about.
So we were just talking about this earlier as we send out guidelines, how different people interpret guidelines and how people address some of the pieces of those guidelines varies from school to school. So at the high school, one of the conversations that we talked about is the fact that, yes, there are certainly those kind of tier 2 and tier 3 kids who are already on our radar. So we're making sure that we have contact with them. Anybody that we're not able to contact and we haven't been able to reach out to the parents, we have their phone, we have their kids' numbers in Aspen, and they've been very good about calling them. But on a bigger scale, there really needs to be a system in place. And that's what I'm working with the middle school and high school to say, I need something in paper to know that there's not this kind of diffusion of responsibility. Well, we thought you had it and you had it, and in the end, nobody had it, right? So where we can look and report back to you and say, okay, here's kind of the process for how we're identifying any kids who are missing some of these Zoom meeting and Zoom chats. And I think that's going to help as we started this process on Monday, where we have a schedule of Zoom meetings with the kids so that teachers are taking attendance to see who is showing up. And if people are not showing up, that we can certainly raise the flag and just say we need to reach out to these particular people. Because I think just for everybody's own social and emotional wellness, even people who are not in our radar, this is starting to weigh heavy on folks. So we certainly want to be aware of those folks. So we will have, I know they're working on it, but we will have something concrete, a written kind of internal plan of the steps involved in making sure everybody's accountable.
Okay, thank you. That's a weight off my mind because that's one that
Yeah.
I've been kind of thinking about. So I know
True.
Maureen and then Kaylee.
I was just gonna say, I mean, I have a high schooler and you know, she has heard from every teacher. Her guidance counselor reaches out on a regular basis. So there has been, at least for my student, I've heard about a lot of communication that's taking place. And in the circle of parents that I know that have high schoolers are all, you know, very happy right now with the amount of communication their students are receiving from their teachers and guidance counselors, and you know, the gym teacher is sending workouts and things like that. So they
Hard
really
ones too.
And I did actually hear one parent was so amazed that the high school principal called their student when it was their birthday.
Yeah.
So, you know, there's some pretty amazing stuff going on for the high school.
Good. Kaylee, did you have something to? You need to unmute yourself if you
Yeah.
don't mind. Thanks.
No, I can definitely say from the student perspective, teachers have been reaching out. I've heard from, as Mrs. Heffernan had said, I've heard from every single one of my teachers. I'm on the honors level. I don't know about the kids. Like, I'm definitely sure if you don't want to be doing the work, it's easy enough to slide by right now. But at the same time, you're definitely, teachers are reaching out and you are hearing from people. It's the beginning and we're all getting used to it. So I know a lot of the students are pretty stressed right now, I've talked to at least. It's mainly that there is so much uncertainty and we haven't really gotten the connections. Like, we have heard the information from the teachers before we've heard them from administration. So I think it was a little bit of that gap, but I think moving on will be a lot more settled in.
Okay, that makes sense.
Great. I
Brian,
know.
do you have
I was gonna say Erin had a question. She had raised her digital hand as a good doobie.
Go ahead, Erin.
I had two questions on the Chromebook, the Chromebooks themselves. Are the kids' accounts locked down so they can't print? And is there a way to make it so that they can? Because I was trying to help Gregory print some stuff out this morning so he could have it physically, and I had to play around with it and trick it into another account to be able to get it to print.
They can't print. The kids can't print, I believe, on their Chromebook.
Yeah.
So it's our own personal Chromebook logged into the school account.
Say that one more time. So it's your Chromebook.
It's our Chromebook, but he logs into his school account in Google, the Google Classroom account, and he's got materials in there, and it won't let him print on our own Chromebook.
Yeah. So that's the Google account governs it, if you will. So whatever the device is, whether if they log in with their student account, those protections and controls are in place. And there's, obviously using it at home is not a concern, but it's a setting that we've had issues with printing in separate locations and shooting off wonderful messages to printers and things. So the basis for it obviously it's a challenge right now. We can actually look to see if that's something that could be lifted while they're at home. We can take a look at that. Yeah.
And then the other thing that I wanted to ask, just as a parent, I was wondering if when the teachers email out, I noticed that for some of the teachers, they're emailing just the kid and not the parent. So we don't know if they haven't gone into their Google account to check it, and they may not check that email as frequently, that they needed to go in and get the lesson, or we actually missed a Zoom. classroom last week for Joshua because of the fact that we didn't know that it was, and it was like a Monday morning first thing
Okay.
type thing.
Okay.
So if they could just email both the parent and the kid when they're sending this stuff out.
Yeah, and we're trying to figure out, because I know I can speak from a perspective as a parent. We're trying to manage the emails, because if it's every teacher is emailing for every event, I can tell you that I was looking in my inbox for both Max and Molly, my two kiddos, and it was like, oh my gosh, I don't know how to make sense of any of this. So I think we're trying to find a balance between 72 emails a day and not enough, right? Because it's also, especially younger kids, if we're not also letting the parents know the expectations, then we don't assume that a 4th or 5th grader is going to necessarily choose to do work and not just say, I'm all good, Mom, done. So I think, yeah, so that's a work in progress. That's good feedback. And I think that's ultimately the idea as well with the Monday plan for the week. So it's not, hey, we're jumping on a Zoom in 20 minutes, see you there. And people either miss it or what have you. So ultimately, the goal is to make sure everything happens that is planned on Monday. You have the full week and there's no surprises. And then it can be, hey parents, take a look at the Google Classroom or the Aspen page or the Stay Connected page. Everything's laid out for the whole week. Let me know if you have any questions. So it's not, and it's ebbing and flowing as we speak. But that's good feedback. Thank you.
Yeah, and if you get any other feedback from parents, it's really helpful. I know some of our feedback, even just our own teachers who have 3, 4 kids at the house and telling us how it's challenging to manage. And as Brian said, Brian and I both obviously have kids at Pentucket, but and everybody is at a different situation depending on the age of their kids too. So the more feedback we can get, the more we can adapt and make sure we are being sensitive to people's environments.
Yeah, absolutely.
Kaylee?
I know it definitely wouldn't work for this issue right now, but in the future, would it be worth it to look into possibly creating a family email account for all of the families? Because I know a lot of teachers are starting to go more Google-based as opposed to using their Aspen accounts.
Yep.
And I know there's a family-based Aspen account for all the families. Would it potentially be something to look into for the future, to have one for the parents to access for their?
Yeah. So that's a good question. And I'm not a Google ninja, so jump in if I'm wrong, Kim. But so the way the Google Classroom works is your parent, Kaylee, could be signed up to get a daily or weekly digest from all of your classes. So that's if you're a parent. If a teacher chooses to enter your parent as a class member, then they get everything. That then means they get everything. So I think that's always not the best alternative. So Google is really good and Google's really limited at the same time because it's free, right? They give it free for a reason. But yeah, no. So
even email wise too, because you were saying your inbox is being flooded for personal and as a parent too. So it's just an
that's a good idea. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Anything else?
So Brian, did you just say that Google Classroom can give those notices now?
Yes. So if you contact the teacher and if they're using Google Classroom, so the connected page is one thing, but a lot of teachers have moved, especially kind of upper elementary on up, are using Google Classroom. So you can get a daily email or a weekly digest email that gives you assignments due, kind of gives you a little report card of what's expected and what has or has not happened. So I believe there's a code. So I think if you contact the teacher, they can share a code with you and invite you. Actually, I think for my kiddos, I got an email and I accepted it. And then it gives me access as a parent into the classroom.
Okay, thanks.
So I do know some teachers, it depends, have invited parents right in. But I have heard from some parents that that's a little bit like the fire hose option. So I think the daily or weekly seems to work best.
Any other feedback? I know, Kim, since you asked for feedback, I just have one thing. I had mentioned this to Brian, but I've heard this from a lot of parents that 8 a.m. on Monday feels like it's late to be able to plan for the week. I don't know if that, I know this is the first week and I don't know if that can be changed at all down the road, but they were saying like even Sunday afternoon, being able to get that, because it feels like Monday they're starting work, they're all of a sudden receiving that, and yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Like your world just blows up at 8 a.m.
Yes. Yeah. That would make sense.
It's not a good feeling.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'd heard that from, I don't know, I'd say 3 or 4 parents, and I know some of them have sent that on as feedback to teachers as well when they were just, you know, emailing back and forth with teachers to ask if that was a
That makes
possibility.
sense. And we're meeting with the principals tomorrow morning, so I'll bring that up.
Okay.
Because that would be hard at 8 o'clock to, coordinate that within a few minutes.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that's the key, right? So, I mean, so the work week is Monday through Friday of what we can expect. I think a lot of teachers would choose to do that, and they absolutely can do that. But I think at a minimum, even if it is happening Monday morning, if it's posted at 8 o'clock, it's not for a first meeting at 8:15, like you just said. It can't be within minutes versus, okay, Monday's kind of slow. Here's what I need you to do. There's no meetings happening on Monday. We're not meeting until Tuesday for a Google Meet or something like that. So yeah, absolutely. Very valid concern indeed.
All right. Anything else before we move on?
I was going to say the rest of the document, I mean, it goes through, I don't need to go through the rest of it. It, you know, kind of goes through expectations at various grade levels. And obviously the primary grades are very different than what we're expecting at the high school level. And then that final, there's a disclaimer there that was actually developed through our district council. Just a disclaimer in regards to online anything. Obviously, you know, we're so far so good here tonight, but you know, things happen with distance learning and online platforms. So just some disclaimers that we need to use best judgment, but we can't always be perfect. So yeah, so if there's no other questions, that's the plan as it is now. And I would say this doesn't have, you know, so this is a kind of a high level. It's not something you need to approve or anything, something high level that we can say, this is our plan. How this is playing out, we'll have multiple iterations. You know, each school is developing their own internal document of how this works, and communicating that out to parents. And I've, you know, seen some communications from principals. I saw one from Pine Grove this morning just about, you know, this is a work in progress. We hear you, give it an attempt, right? Ultimately, especially at the elementary level, to say that there was an attempt, right? We're calling that an attempt. If something can't happen because of some complication, whether again that's capability, ability, socioeconomic, or just the nature of a pandemic closure, kids will not be disadvantaged for that. So we're asking people to give it their best, be flexible, be patient, and we're all in this together. So.
All right, thank you. Moving on to the District Communications Committee, which is item B in that section. So you'll see the notes and discussion are on there. The 2 main topics of that conversation were the budget, which we had passed just before that BCC meeting. So Brian and Kyle went briefly over the final budget for that at that meeting. And then the other one was a review of the regional agreement, which we're going to get to later here. So I don't know if anybody wanted to add anything about that meeting. So, and I'll just add in this section because I think it's also relevant to that. If you haven't had a chance to either attend or watch the meeting that we had with our legislators on the 30th, I would by all means welcome you to go back and do it. It is a wealth of information. I think we were on the phone for an hour and a half, something like that, or on a Zoom, I guess I should say. And we covered everything from kind of what they knew about legislation that was coming, state budget. We had all our town officials on there. So we talked about unemployment. We talked about small businesses. I mean, it is just a huge wealth of information. I took it and posted it on my social media accounts and shared it out that way. And there were a lot of people that just said, thank you so much for this. I've been looking for information. I know there was a follow-up set of links that Senator DeZoglio's office sent over that I sent out to you by email. I believe a couple of the towns have literally taken that list verbatim and posted it on their website because it was extremely comprehensive and had links to pretty much anything you wanted to know about what's going on during the pandemic. So, all right. Anybody want to add anything on that? All right.
Yeah.
Moving on, the school committee goal progress update. So this is one that was on our schedule. We've made a little progress toward this, but not much. My suggestion at this point is going to be that we suspend our goals for the rest of the year because I don't think it makes sense for us to attempt to work on them in the situation that we're currently in. It just doesn't lend itself given everything else that I think everyone has going on in their lives right now. So we don't need a formal vote for that, but does anybody have an objection or anything that they, want to add to that thought? All right, seeing none, we'll move on from there. I was contacted by Alicia Davison 2 weeks ago, I think it was now. She and another parent from Newbury are taking on putting back together the CPAC, the Special Education Parent Advocacy Council. And one of the things that they are doing as part of that is they are trying to figure out kind of what the relationship is going to be with the school committee. So Alicia reached out to me and just asked if we could consider having an official school committee liaison to the CPAC. So that would start in the fall. And I said to her at that point, I felt a little odd because we have an election coming up and I know we have at least 2 members retiring, and obviously every year we have at least 3 members that are up on the ballot. So we could potentially make a decision this month and then have turnover in the school committee next month. And it just didn't feel like it was a good time to make an appointment for a liaison to the CPAC. But I wanted to bring this here just because I felt like it was timely rather than kind of drop this in May after the election on the committee, to just bring it here and have a conversation about kind of how we want to liaise with the CPAC, whether traditionally it's been done with one school committee member kind of being their touch point representative, attending some of their bigger meetings during the year, and then bringing that information back to the school committee as probably an action item on our agenda, unless I defer to Deb and Dina in this one, unless it's been handled differently in the past. And then obviously there would be situations as well where the CPAC representatives would attend our school committee meetings to weigh in directly on any issues that would be especially relevant to them. So I guess I'll open it up first and say, Deb and Dina, how was this handled in the past?
That makes sense to me.
What?
Oop.
Sorry, hi.
Go ahead, Deb.
Well, I was just gonna say, CPAC representatives have come to the meetings. I don't remember anybody from the school committee going to a CPAC meeting. You,
Not
Dina?
assigned.
No.
Not assigned, but
No, I
some
don't
have in the past.
Okay.
Right, but so that would be a more structured approach than what existed
What we've
before.
traditionally had. Okay. Does anybody have any objections to do it that way? I want to set up kind of the framework with them, and then my hope would be, if everyone's on board with it, to wait until the May meeting to actually appoint somebody to that position to see who would be interested based on who's serving on the school committee at that time, knowing that this would be for the start for the fall that it would start.
I would almost say wait till September to do it.
Yeah, they're hoping to start meeting as a board in August to set up that meeting schedule. So I think that would set them almost, they would be having their first meeting potentially before we appointed someone.
Okay.
So that was the kind of objection. All right. So not hearing anyone else or seeing any hands on the list. I'll get back to Alicia and kind of just communicate that to her. If you are particularly interested in serving as the school committee liaison, can you just get in touch with me, because I want to kind of have that conversation, hopefully even before May, to kind of feel out what the responsibility would be. And I think that's best done with the person who would potentially serve in that position, though knowing that, you know, whoever comes forward may not be the person that's chosen by the school committee, just to get an idea of kind of where that would lead. My conversation with Alicia, since as far as I knew this hadn't been done in the past, and I knew it definitely hadn't been done in the recent past, was that, you know, we need to figure out what's right for the district and for the CPAC. And well, I definitely appreciate that there's a lot of material out there from the FNSC, I think it is, maybe one of the special education folks
Federation,
can
yeah.
on that. Special something or other, children with special needs. That you know, we need to find out what works for us, because if we have too strict of a framework, or if we have too lax of a framework, that's not, you know, that's not a good situation for Triton. So we need to find the right fit for Triton and the right way to work this for Triton, and that's probably going to take some trial and error.
And Narissa, can I add, previously, years ago, when we had a more active CPAC, they used to come to one of our meetings, usually I believe in August or September, at some point to tell us what their concerns were, what they were working on, whatever. But that's been a long time since that's happened. But again, it hasn't been an active group either.
Yeah. I think they've got a good start from what I've heard. They already have a board that's being appointed this year. I guess it would be elected next year, from what she told me. So they have a number of people that are already interested. They have started a Facebook page, I believe, to be able to get out some information. I know that they've been getting communications out. So they've already got parents that are interested. Some parents that even don't have a child on a 504 or an IEP, who have they're in that sort of in-between stage right now, which is, I think, when in the past, a lot of people have reached out to me to say, do we have a CPAC? Is there a parent group? That's kind of the stage where they're reaching out to say, you know, kind of, is there somebody to bounce my experiences off of as I'm having them? That's when they come. So I think it's terrific, because it's going to kind of encompass the whole range of folks straight off the bat. So, all right. So moving on, we'll go to the monthly report of the superintendent of schools. I just wanted to say, Brian asked me if it was okay to just give this orally, because he obviously things are changing, and he could have probably gotten us the written report, I don't know, you know, half an hour ago with the most current information. Maybe it's still developing. And I said to him, you know, I'd rather have the most up-to-date information than I would have something in print. So I hope that's okay with the committee. That was kind of my judgment call on this one. So with that, I'll turn it over to Brian. Brian, you're muted.
There I am, right?
There you go.
All right, two computers going with two mice. So thanks for the flexibility. So honestly, it's the monthly report and then right into the COVID district response. So it's kind of melded, but I did need to put an action item there, because I think there are some things that it's prudent for you to take a vote on. So a couple routine updates. Certainly wanted to start with a thank you to everyone, literally everyone associated with the Triton Regional School District, whether you live in town, you're a town official, you're a teacher, a student, a family. It has been unbelievable to see the response of the community around this pandemic and the closure. It's been challenging in ways that I didn't think could be challenging. And each new day, I find a new way to be challenged, and am confronted with never thought of that at least 5 times a day. So I just want to thank everyone for the flexibility. I know, you know, working with our Teachers Association and in general, the entire process has gone very smoothly. So I'm very appreciative there. One, also just give you an update. So the stadium repair, we've been talking about that. One half was done. The second piece was in process of being priced out. We're now still waiting for that. Obviously, that is all slowed way back. We're now waiting on the engineer to confirm the correct, or that the proposed solution is the correct solution. So that's still a work in progress. You noticed, I believe last Friday, and will continue this week, in an attempt to continue some sense of normalcy, the weekly digest emails are going out every Friday again. Some of it will certainly be COVID closure related. Other things, hopefully, we're going to continue to just bring back. Had the Facebook page from Brody from last month, the student of the month, and Narissa has been. We've got a draft email to go out about the calendar that you approved last month that we haven't, shared publicly. I mean, it's obviously public, but we haven't kind of put it out there yet. So trying to find a balance on all of the closure stuff so that we can get back to just some routine communications, because I think that's helpful for everyone to just have some kind of routine communication again. So that's happening. So we're obviously waiting for the state budget. You've approved a budget for us. I think it's a fair budget. It's a budget that that addresses a lot of the concerns we raised. If you listen to, well, it depends who you listen to, but if you listen to certain people right now, you will be petrified, and other people think it's a non-issue, but I think somewhere in the middle the truth lies, and certainly this is going to go from a year where the state was feeling pretty good to now we're going to find ourselves in a challenging situation. I think the towns will be, certainly from an anticipated revenue standpoint. So obviously, that the town meetings are in the process of being backed out, the elections. So pretty much everything is going to be delayed this year. We're moving forward with our anticipated hirings for anyone, whether it was a new position or a retirement. We can't wait until May or June and then decide and think we're going to find the right people. So positions are posted. We've got them out there. And once principals get to a point where they're not doing remote learning and trying to address remote learning issues for 15 hours a day, we're going to get to the point where we'll do some, start with some Zoom or, chat interviews, and then, continue the process a little differently this year. But just so that you're aware, we are continuing the processes for hiring for next year. Also to continue, or to let you know that, I had shared with you that the district office is operating and performing every function that it normally would. Had a Zoom staff meeting today. It was good to see everyone's face, and we're going to now do those weekly, but there are folks in and out of the office. No one's in there, for the day. But, given the various roles and payroll and accounts receivable and having to print checks and all that, we've certainly have folks in and out throughout the week to do the process. We now have a remote warrant signing process in place. And then you obviously know that the food service folks are rotating. They're working Monday, Wednesday, Friday on a rotating basis, and custodians are doing a rotation. So every building is covered for 4 hours a day. So other than that, the district is functioning entirely remotely. Whenever possible, the buildings are dark and empty. And when someone does need to be there for the role, for their role, it's generally a one-off individual. So just make sure that you're aware of how that's operating. It seems to be working well, and when folks leave a voicemail, it ends up in an inbox, and people are getting calls back and return calls. So certainly let us know if you're hearing. I think the communication is flowing as it normally has. People are generally pleased with, from a district operations, people are pretty pleased with getting responses from our office, regardless of the various departments. So if you ever hear that someone's not getting, leaving voicemails and not hearing, if there's a mailbox somewhere that's dead and not getting forwarded to someone, certainly we want to know about that. But to date, it seems to be going very smoothly. I was going to let you know, so just for the meals and the Chromebooks, as I said earlier, we're approaching 400 Chromebooks loaned out. And currently there are about 300 students that are participating in the meals program. So that's 600 meals per day. So that's 300 breakfasts and 300 lunches every day. So that's 1,200 being produced for Monday pickup, for Monday and Tuesday, another 1,200, and then 1,800 over the weekend for those 300 kiddos for 3 days worth of meals. So again, can't be said enough. Thank you to Lucinda for her just her genius in putting this plan together that just uses the system and rides the line, but a completely legal reimbursable system. And so thank you for her genius behind it. And then for all the food service folks that are out there with smiles on their faces every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, loving the work that they're doing. I think the rest probably transitions into more COVID-19 specific things. So are there any questions about anything that I shared? I'm looking for digital hands or real hands. People have real hands. Nothing.
Seeing none.
Seeing none. Okay. So we talked about the remote learning plan. We talked about the special education approach. So just to make sure, are folks clear in regards to our academic approach at this point for during the closure? So the plan that we put in place with the remote learning plan was put in place with the assumption that whether we come back on May 4th or May 20th or don't come back at all, it's a plan that we would continue to keep in place and obviously improve on with every day that passes. But as we had said, special education is certainly, I would say, the greatest work in process, as it's just a very different structure for delivering services. But so before we go past that completely, I just want to make sure, so there's no questions about the academics piece? No.
How are we planning on accommodating for next year? Because there's definitely going to be a gap.
Yeah.
How is that planning to be accommodated?
Great question, Kaylee. So I had this discussion today. So part of the equity issue is if we say, which we have said, and the governor or the commissioner has said, you shouldn't be introducing new material, right? Reinforcing old material, taking all the learning you did for 6 months and deepening that learning. If we were to continue on with introducing, say, what we normally would have covered in chemistry in April and May, we know there would be some students who wouldn't be able to access that. Again, myriad reasons of why. So part of the benefit of making sure that we're all on the same page and not introducing new material is that then that allows us, so again, taking that chemistry teacher, allows us to rework that. And so that if, technically, if there's a class that's kind of a subsequent, maybe chemistry isn't the good example, but 4th to 5th grade, there's content that we know we wouldn't have covered in 4th grade. So then the 5th and 6th grade teams are aware of that content. If there's content that may be important for the 5th grade MCAS, for example, then we can work with 5th grade teachers to make sure that content is added in early on. So that is part of the reason why we have to keep everything consistent in regards to the delivery of instruction, so that we can make sure that we don't have those holes. Because if not, you're right, we would end up with some kids would be here, other kids would be here, and we'd miss a whole section versus allowing us to strategize and backfill that. Not an easy thing to do, but something we need to be able to do. So I don't know, Kim or Lady Shark, do you have anything you wanted to add? Maybe she stepped away. That's why she's not.
I'm right here.
Oh, she's there. Sorry, just checking.
I'm right here. Hold on. Yeah, I think at this point, also the state is going to have to make some adjustments with the standards, right? Because if we're saying that we're never going to be able to play catch up realistically, because then you do more damage trying to gloss over something as opposed to really going in depth with it. So I would imagine that they're going to have to adjust the standards for next year as far as the curriculum that we teach, because I can't imagine they're not going to give us some guidance moving forward, because everybody's going to be in a similar situation.
Yep.
Does that make sense? I don't know.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, but I think the key here is that you said is that we have not been introducing anything new. So that makes it somewhat easier to do that as a state. And I know even when they were looking at the AP exam, basically saying that anything on the AP exam, they were not going to create questions that would have been covering content that had been taught after that March 13th date. So. Yeah.
Absolutely. All right. I'm sorry, I'm trying to manage here too and looking at the chat. So I'm missing a whole fun chat going on. I just realized while I was talking. I got to keep my chat window open. Did someone say something about snacks? Are there snacks somewhere that I'm missing? No, maybe not. Okay, so let's take these. Let's talk about the calendar. So April break, right? So that's right, so we currently, the last day of school is Friday, June 19th. With that last day, that assumes we are taking April vacation off. So a week ago, everyone was assuming, yeah, we all need the break. We're taking April vacation. That's just the way it's going to work. Some discussions started, and actually a lot of teachers brought forward and said, hey, look, we're just getting rolling. I think Kaylee was saying it earlier. By one token, my gosh, I'm exhausted and would love a break. But on the other token, it's, oh my gosh, we're just, day 3 here, we're finally hitting a groove. Every day is a little better. Not the best time as far as academic continuity to take a break. So that has blossomed again as a discussion in across the state. So I know, Narissa, you were hearing, I forget who it was you were hearing from.
Yeah, so I actually have a list. So this is self-reported, but I just thought it was going to be, something helpful to bring to this discussion. The districts so there are essentially 3 approaches right now. Some districts are taking Monday because we have to take Monday. It's Patriots Day. And then they're working through Tuesday through Friday as remote learning. Some of those are deciding to take those, to adjust their school calendar for those days. Some of them have not made that decision yet. Some districts are taking the break as it was already scheduled on their calendars. And then there are a few districts who are doing a hybrid model where they're taking like a couple of days for vacation, so longer than, the 3-day weekend, but then they're coming back either early or something like that. So I can read you off the list that I have. So the districts that are working through the break, so they're continuing remote learning, are Ashburnham, Westminster, Ashland, Cohasset, Dartmouth, Diamond, Fall River, Grafton, Hingham, Holbrook, Lenox, Marlborough, Milford, Millis, Needham, Newton, Tingsboro, Westford, Whitman, Hanson, and Worcester. The districts that are taking the break currently are Amesbury, Andover, Athol, Royalston, Boston, Brockton, Cambridge, Concord, Fitchburg, Hamilton, Wenham, Northbridge, Quabbin Regional, Silver Lake Regional, and Somerville. And then there are 2 districts that have reported that they are doing a hybrid model. So Burlington will be taking Tuesday off in addition to the Monday. And then they will be doing remote learning Wednesday through Friday. And Reading is taking Monday, Tuesday, and Friday off. So their students will be doing remote learning Wednesday and Thursday of that week. And then obviously have the Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and come back on the following Monday. So that's the self-reported list as of right now. I know a lot of districts were looking for this list because they're making the decision either tonight or tomorrow night. Those seem to be the 2 big meeting nights where people are kind of taking this on.
I can tell you locally, so Hamilton, Wenham is definitely closed. Whittier is definitely closed. Georgetown is definitely closed. Ipswich, Triton, Pentucket, Newburyport, are discussing tonight, tomorrow night. Masconomet chose to stay open. Linfield is open. There was another one that is open. So it's varied, and it's for varied reasons. As part of the discussion, obviously it's what works for families and it's what works for educators and students. So there's a lot involved. I'll tell you, we surveyed all of our educators. So we had 271 response out of a total of about 340 teachers and IAs, and 75.3% said they would prefer to work right through the break. Lots of questions about, is there a hybrid possibility? Is there something in between, similar to what you were saying, Narissa, about I think it was Burlington and someone else is doing. And
Reading.
that's certainly, yeah, I believe Reading, and actually I think North Reading is doing the same thing. That's certainly a possibility. But so what that would mean is if we take the vacation, the last day of school is June 19th. If we didn't take the vacation, we get back 4 days. So Monday we're closed regardless. That's Patriots Day. So that's a state holiday. So we're closed Monday. So we would gain 4 days back, and we would then have the last day of school on Monday the 15th. If we did some kind of a hybrid model, I would suggest to you, if there was going to be a hybrid model, I would say take Friday as a vacation day as well and work Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. So there would be a 3-day weekend, a 3-day week for some consistency, and then another 3-day weekend. Or I suppose you could, do it on either end. And then, yeah, so those are the possibilities. So if we did had Friday off as well, then we would be, the last day of school would be the 16th, which is a Tuesday. So I think there's arguments on both sides, and there's the possibility. I would say to you, if I had a definitive answer, if you look to me and say, what's your suggestion, Brian? I would say, my gosh, I wish I knew what's happening on May 4th, because if we're coming back on May 4th, I would say absolutely, let's have the break as normal, because I want to save as many days as possible for the actual days when teachers and students are sitting in classrooms, right? That's what we want to preserve. If we're not coming back, May 4th, we're not coming back at all, then my answer would be the exact opposite. Let's get the days in. We could take breaks as we need them, and go from there. So without having that information, it's a tough decision, and I don't think there's a right answer. I think, given the fact that I would say I'm strongly convinced we're not coming back on May 4th. I'm not strongly convinced that we're not coming back at all, is kind of where I am right now, as far as that's not based on anything other than my own opinion and my own understanding, based on listening to lots of opinions and lots of phone calls and discussions at the state level about how you back out of a pandemic closure. So I don't know, certainly lots of perspectives to share. And I see one digital hand raised. Paul figured this out. So Paul, your hand is lower and your line's unmuted.
My 2 cents on this, Brian, is I happen to believe that the educators are the most important component that we have going forward. And if 75% of them want to work through it, I think that's something that we should listen to loud and clear, because I think at the end of the day, the educators probably have the best pulse about what they're trying to accomplish. So that's my 2 cents.
Can I just ask a clarifying question on that, Brian?
Sure.
Because during our conversations, I know my take on this definitely changed in hearing about kind of the way it would change the overall calendar, the school calendar for the end of the year. Yep. Was that communicated as part of that survey, or was it a strict, do you want to work through this or do you not want to work through this?
Meaning the last day of school pulls in?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So it's definitively, so maybe I don't think I clarified that, right? So these are, all of the days of closure are considered work days, right? So they're school days. The 185-day requirement, 180-day requirement, Department of Ed, that's all kind of a separate calculation. But as far as working teacher expectations, we closed on Friday, and as of Monday, when we were the first day of closure, teachers had office hours, they were available, connecting. So those were all work days. So the past 3 weeks, all these days of closure are work days. So if we were to close, the calendar stays intact. If we're to stay open, then that has to bring the date back in, because we can't leave the date in, or we're asking and would then need to pay teachers those additional work days. So the memo that the commissioner, I believe I forwarded it to you, it basically, whatever days you pull out of your calendar, you pull in from your 185th day. Yes. So it was described to the teachers that way, and all educators that way. Yep. So if we didn't do break, we would have the last day on Monday the 15th. If we do have break as scheduled, we're getting out on June 19th, a Friday.
Okay.
I think that was the question, right? Did the teachers?
Yeah, that
know
was
that.
my
Yeah. Yeah.
that was the question, because I think I mean, at least my take on this was when you and I first started discussing it, it was very much about you know, kind of mental health and kind of that academic settling in, if I will, of the remote learning,
Yeah.
and making sure that you know, you don't lose the gains that you've made over the couple weeks coming into that. And then as you and I started talking more about how that could change the schedule, potentially, I think that became a very different conversation about potentially having, you know, more days with kids in the classroom if we're going back at some point down the road.
Yeah, so that gets to be a complicated discussion, but what I was sharing with Narissa is, so if you took a vote tonight and say we go the hybrid route, right? So we're gonna have Monday off for the holiday and we're gonna take Friday off, but we're gonna work Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. So that technically moves the last day of school to Tuesday the 16th, sorry. However, if we, you know, sometime in early May, they determine, you know, we're coming back June 1st and it's firm, we could choose to take more vacation days. Again, that wouldn't be something you'd have to decide tonight, but we could say, you know what, let's make Memorial Day weekend a 5-day weekend and take a couple extra days. And because of those days off, that then pushes us back out to the 19th as the last day. So if we took more days off scheduled later to be determined during the closure, that frees up days for when we're back in, right? Dream world for me is we're back in by June 1st. Because that would give us through the 19th, that gives us 3 complete weeks of intact. It's not going to be the world's greatest instruction and, you know, amazing amount of content delivered, but it's going to allow us to welcome kids back, reconnect, have a discussion, and close the year so that when we return in September, it feels somewhat normal. For the seniors, the class of 2020, you know, they'll technically be gone by then. But I think working something to bring them back, have a discussion, have some closure, allow them to do the things that, all those rites of passage that I know is so important for any student. So yeah, so that wouldn't be something you'd have to determine today, but that would remain a possibility as we move forward through the balance of the closure. That you could push those days out by not taking them now. You could push them out. Right, so by not having the vacation during April break and working 3 of the 4, you're banking 3 of them to use later or to keep it moved into the June timeframe.
Right. So yeah, I think my question was a little more simplistic than that. I just wanted to know if the teachers understood that that you could potentially have you know, more days in the classroom at the end based on this vacation decision that they were taking that they were answering the survey on. I wasn't sure if it was just literally, do you want vacation in 2 weeks or not?
No, it literally, the survey said there was a whole descriptor, you know, about how the whole process will work. Yep, very clear. It was not a million questions. After the description, it was, are you in favor of working through the week or are you in favor not? And then a lot of people who I believe were in favor of working through the week also emailed me and said, hey, have you thought about the hybrid model? So, all right.
Brian, could somebody recognize Mr. Goldner? He's had his hand up for quite a while.
Who has?
Paul Goldner.
Oh, he's got a real hand. I'm sorry. I was looking for digital hands. I'm sorry. So
go ahead, Paul.
I think my take on this question is watching what sort of happening in the educators around me. I'm seeing that a lot of educators are like, oh yeah, this is no problem. I've got this. I'm ready to roll. But there's kind of the minority of educators, and most of them are elementary, and in particular the special ed, are drowning. And we're counting on the April break to kind of get their heads above water, because the requirements for the special education teachers are significantly higher, hurdles and time commitments and specific time commitments, where they have to be on at a certain time and finding the ways to manage that. And so my question is, you know, you've got this 75-25 breakdown, but do we know how the special education teachers are doing? Do they have their heads above water and they're ready to work through, or are they underwater and looking at that break as necessary to get themselves to a place where they can go for the rest of the year?
I don't know, Dave, do you want to take that question? I unmuted you. Oh, no. There you are.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I can answer that specifically. I think everybody is really overwhelmed.
Yeah.
But the conversations I've had is that people are, doing the best they can at this point. So I don't know if we want to sort of delineate special ed versus regular ed. I think it needs to be a decision that's made as a whole. But my communications have been that people are obviously stressed and anxious, but I think everybody is. So I don't know if I would parse out just special education teachers.
I would also say, we've tried really hard to take, I think I was saying earlier, it's teachers are their own worst enemy, right? Because they have a standard of what they're expecting of themselves to deliver to students. And that's a good thing, right? That's why we love our teachers. So whether regular ed or specialist, but for special ed specifically, they're very, as you were saying, Paul, very rigid timelines and structures. And then when they don't meet those, there are usually legal problems. So, working with Dave in the Department of Ed, there's been lots of discussions to say, look, the Russell Johnston, who's the Deputy Commissioner of Special Education, has said, look, working with the Bureau of Special Education Appeals and attorneys, the approach here is we're going to take the best thing is to start providing services, right? They're not going to be perfect. There's going to have to be an understanding that what we can do remotely is different than what we can do in person. So I think that's I think it would be unfair to say that special educators, specifically to the question, are not overwhelmed, because I'm sure they are. But I'm hoping that our approach has supported them to say, look, you're not doing anything wrong. Start. You can't do everything you're supposed to be able to do, but start, and let's work our way towards it. And I will say, I think there's certainly been some challenges in working with specific parents, but I think by and large, parents have been very supportive and receptive to the services. So, but I think it's a valid point, Paul. That's certainly the 25%. There are folks who are just burned out. Absolutely. So I don't know if, Narissa, if you can see, I've seen Maureen's, Linda's, and Deb's hands, and Kaylee's.
Yeah, I was going to go to Maureen next, and then Deb, and then we'll head over to Linda.
Okay, I can't figure out how to virtually raise my hand, but I did fix my name. So no, I would be interested in possibly seeing some sort of hybrid, because I'm concerned about some of the anxiety levels that the students are experiencing. I see in my own home, the anxiety is rising. I'm hearing from other parents as the students are just trying to figure it out.
Yeah.
So maybe a little break of some kind for everybody to just kind of take a big deep breath and recharge, and then, have a shortened break and then get back at it. I just think I'm just concerned about students that don't normally experience anxiety are probably going through a lot right now.
Yeah, that's a fair statement.
Deb?
I agree with Maureen. I think that there are both teachers and students that need to take a breath and maybe assess what they've been doing and have a chance to rethink it, maybe move forward in a better way. So I understand 75% of them want to work right through vacation, but maybe given a second chance, they might say the hybrid would be a good alternative. I think people need to take a breath.
Yeah.
Okay, and was it Erin, Linda? I'm sorry, I forgot who the third person was. Linda, go for it, Linda. You have to unmute yourself. We can't hear you.
I can't even unmute her. She's power muted.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Oh, there she is.
Okay.
Yes.
I agree with the hybrid model. From a parent who has a special education child, it is, I believe, a lot harder for those students, even though the teachers are great. I just think it's much harder for those students to access the curriculum. I think having some time off to take a deep breath and maybe be able to have conversations with teachers leading up to the break might be helpful for some of those students.
Who else?
I think Kaylee.
Did I see? I'll ask Kaylee. She's on the other screen. She is. Sorry, Mike. I can't allow you to speak during this. Go ahead, Kaylee.
So I think I definitely agree that a lot of the students are definitely starting to get stressed. But it also comes to the part where I feel like if we were to do personally as a student, from a student standpoint, I feel as though if we were to do the idea where we take the Tuesday off or say, I feel like we would want to lump it with the first weekend as opposed to taking the Friday off. Because if we were to take the Friday off, then it would just be that weird point in the middle of the week. So it wouldn't feel like a full break. It would just feel like an extended weekend. And you'd have one day off and a weekend before you get full back into the swing of things. But the other idea I was having was, I don't know how it works out, but I know that technically Good Friday is a half day for us. Instead of taking possibly the full day off for that week, could we do half day learning to accommodate both of the sections of the teachers that want to work through and the ones that would rather have some time? Because if we lessened the workload, it would give people time to think as well as keep that pushing through as well. I don't know if that would be an option or not.
Yeah, so Good Friday, good question. Good Friday is technically not from the student perspective, but from the, now looking at it, the mothership as an employee, it's a full work day for all of us. So the difference is that's technically a regular work day. So we're treating it as a regular day during the closure.
Okay.
So it wouldn't give us any days to work with. But to your point, as you were saying that, I was actually thinking, because I think I was saying earlier, Monday's off because of the holiday and then take the Friday off. Actually, as you were saying it, and as we were talking about Burlington, it actually makes more sense. And from what I'm hearing from folks talking about an actual need for a break, if we're going to go the hybrid model, I do think it actually makes sense to tack it onto the holiday weekend, so it becomes a true break, right? If it's, you take the Tuesday and the Wednesday, or the Wednesday and the third, whatever the days are, to add it to that first week, that first weekend actually makes it an extended break, which I think achieves what I've heard several people say, that there are a lot who want to push right through, but there are others, and I think some of these folks, if we really kind of dove into the details, would agree that an extended break is going to be a good thing for everyone.
And then it would also help on the tail end, I think, because let's face it, I know high school wise, last day of school, a lot of people don't go. I've always gone, my family makes me, but no, so if we had that one day, then it would push the last day to Tuesday, which would encourage more students to go the Monday, Tuesday route than it would to just not go the weekend. Like,
good thinker. Well said. Yes, a Monday half day, last day of school, probably not a strong attendance on that day, fairly safe to say. Of course, everyone will show up, but Good points.
Can I just say, Kaylee, based on the Brady Bunch grid that I see right now, if you put out your left hand and kind of punch in that direction, you're going to hit Brian.
Oh, really?
That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, you never know. I got to be careful who I punch and poke around here.
All right. Any other feedback? So I'm hearing a lot of hybrid models in the recent discussion. Does anybody have any strong feelings before we kind of head in that direction about going full week vacation or full week work through? Paulise, can you unmute yourself? Sorry.
I can unmute you.
Or Brian can unmute you.
He's power muted himself. I've lost all control.
Can you unmute yourself, Paul? There you go.
I was the one made the statement at the outset, but having heard Linda Witkowski and some other people speak, I'm going to go with the general consensus. That's my feeling.
Okay, terrific. Thank you. Anybody else have strong feelings in the other directions? Okay, so looking at a hybrid model then, the most recent thing I've heard is a Monday, Tuesday, I believe, right? That was where we last ended.
I would
Does-
suggest that, yes.
See thumbs up out there. Okay, does anybody have any concerns or suggestions about that? About going with the Monday Patriots Day and then the official vacation day taking off of our 185 days being Tuesday. Okay. Do you want an official vote on that, Brian? Because I'm thinking that's the direction everybody's leaning in.
You need to vote, yes, you're adjusting the school committee calendar, yep.
Okay.
Or the school committee is adjusting the school year calendar, yes.
The school year calendar, okay.
Yeah, so I guess the one question I would say is, so we're working 3 of the days and having 1 of the days of vacation. So it's 2 days of vacation. 1 of them is off the plate because it's a Monday holiday. So just to make sure no one's talking about having off through Wednesday and working Thursday, Friday. I know there's some other folks, other districts that have played with that. I still like the idea of banking those days because it gives us flexibility later on in the school year. If we are going to be able to come back, we could schedule those days in May and have some extra vacation, and then again have everyone in the classrooms until the 19th of June. But yeah, so I would still recommend that it's the Monday, Tuesday, but just want to make sure that wasn't doesn't sound like it was interested or anyone was interested or discussing that, but just to make sure that we had that conversation.
Okay, so sticking with Monday, Tuesday.
That would be my recommendation. Yep.
Anything different from that?
Okay.
Okay, so before we vote that, because that leads us into the school year calendar final day conversation as well, which is also on that list. I know one of the things that you and I had talked about earlier, just to kind of set the stage on this one, was that these were sort of interdependent because what we did with the vacation will also affect that final day of school. But we had also talked about the fact that we don't need to take a vote on the final day of school right now. Correct. And I know, to Kaylee's point, that definitely kind of continues the uncertainty, but we're in a position of uncertainty right now as well, where we don't know what's going to happen as of May 4th. If we're, like Brian said, is it a situation where we're coming back on June 1st? Are we coming back sometime later in May? Are they going to say, no, there's no more school for this calendar year? We don't really know what's going to happen at this point. And my suggestion would be to leave the final day as it is right now on the calendar and not change it, so that as we come into future school committee meetings down the road and we know better what the state is going to decide around this closure, we can make some very educated decisions at that point on where we want to place those days if it's not at the end of the calendar year.
So you're...
sorry. We do have to make that one change, right? Because we're taking, yeah.
Well, I was just gonna say, so they're connected. So yeah. If you don't change the last day of school, you're adding work days for teachers.
Right, so we need to change.
So you don't have to vote on the last day of school, right? We know by the governor's, or I keep calling him the governor, the commissioner's proclamation, we're going to the 185th day. You could go longer if you chose as a committee to do that. I would not suggest you take that angle. But if right now, June 19th is the last day of school, if you choose to remain open, sounds like we're going the Wednesday, Thursday, Friday of April vacation, that automatically pulls the 185th day back to the 181st day, 182nd day, because we're working those days. So you don't have to take a vote on anything, but the action you're taking to adjust the April vacation, in essence, pulls that date back automatically.
Yeah.
You can move it around later and it could push it out, but as far as work days, we're bringing 3 work days earlier. We're adding 3 work days during April vacation. So that's automatically pulling it in 3 days.
Yeah. Kaylee?
Just a suggestion, but if it was worded as the closure for that with the like end of school, the set end of school day subject to change determined on additional closures or return to school or something along the lines of that would probably sound better, I know, to the student body.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I would definitely, I mean, I'm always behind providing a reason when we can
Yeah.
to help people understand where that's coming from. So I think that makes, complete sense.
Yep.
Anybody else want to weigh in on that one? All right, so let me figure out dates here real quick so I can get a motion going. So can I get a motion to change the April vacation for 2020 to be April 20th, Patriots Day, as well as Tuesday, April 21st, with remote learning to continue on the 22nd, 23rd, and 24th of that week.
I'll make that motion.
All right. Maureen, can I get a second?
This is Tina. I'll second.
All right. Thank you, Tina. And I need a roll call, so I'll go right down the list. Maureen?
Yes.
Deb? Oh, Deb, can you unmute, please?
Yes.
Thank you. Erin?
Yes.
Tina?
Yes.
Paul Goldner?
Yes.
Dina?
Yes.
Linda? I feel like Linda has us on a rolly cart. Still can't hear you, but she's thumbs upping.
She's thumbs up.
Paul, Lise?
Yes.
Okay.
All
Yes.
right. Thank you. Thank you, Linda.
I
All
know
right.
mine's not working right. Now I can't mute it.
So moving on, can we go to continued regular pay for all employees through a specific date, please, Brian?
Yes. So we've continued, we've had this discussion. I don't think it's a change in practice. I just wanted to make sure that I think it's important that the school committee takes a vote to continue the practice of paying all full-time and part-time hourly employees. Again, it doesn't change anything from what has already been the case to date. But I do think it's important for you as a committee to take that vote. As we discussed with the DCC a week and a half ago, 2 weeks, I don't know, it seems like a year and a half ago, the towns are following suit and doing the same thing. So that was certainly a consideration. And if we were going to continue doing that and the towns weren't, that would obviously put us in a tough position. But as of the last discussion we had with the towns, they were continuing that. So right now we're closed through May 4th. Officially, then I would suggest that you take a vote to continue paying all full-time and part-time, including hourly employees, through May 4th. That doesn't mean that if it's extended beyond May 4th that we wouldn't continue paying them, but I think it makes sense to continue with the actual documented closure. And also, Kyle's going to talk about the audit here in a minute, and Kyle's been on calls at least every Monday, Wednesday, Friday with the state. And if the end of the year turns bleak, I will say Dracut last night was the first district out there to start talking about layoffs, just anticipating that the end of the year is not going to be a good thing. So I don't anticipate we get there, but with that reality, I think it's prudent for you to take action, formally voting to continue pay for all full and part-time employees, regular day employees, through May 4th.
Brian, can I suggest that we say through the duration of the closure instead? Because then if the date fluctuates, we don't have to revote? Or does that matter?
I guess the only thing would change is if we find ourselves in a financial situation where we have no other option, right? I think Narissa used the term, right? We want to do right by our employees because they are, the lifeline to our students. But by the same token, if we find ourselves in a situation where we can't, right? I mean, who knows what could happen and change. Again, we don't anticipate it changes like that overnight, but I just think it's the prudent thing to do to take the votes through the duration of the closure. Like I said, if we get to May 4th, we don't have another school committee meeting until May 13th. But I would certainly be in communication with Narissa, and if we needed to have a meeting beforehand, it doesn't sound like the sentiment of the committee would change, that as long as we're in good fiscal standing, we're going to continue paying our employees. If that were to change, we could call everyone together and, through finance subcommittee and, take different action. But I think it makes sense to just keep it confined.
Good point.
Yeah. And, and be sure that was actually a discussion with the central office folks today, that, make sure that we're messaging that doesn't mean we're stopping pay for everyone on May 4th. It's simply a matter of the structure.
Yep. Any other points anyone wants to make? Sorry, I'm trying to watch for hands all over the place. All right. Seeing that, can I get a motion to continue regular pay for all full-time and part-time day employees through May 4th, 2020, please?
I'll make a motion to approve pay through May 4th, 2020 for all employees.
I'll second.
Second from Maureen. All right, any further discussion? All right, roll call vote. I've got Linda. My screen keeps changing, so you're up first. She's a thumbs up. By the way, Haley's in the chat. Just wanted to let you know that you can press down on your space bar while you wait to talk and then let it go to mute again. No, doesn't it work for you? Okay, all right. Dina?
Yes.
Paulise? Yes?
Paul, you're on mute.
Paul? Yeah, you're on mute, Paul. Yeah, there you go.
Oh.
I think that was a yes. No, that was a no.
All right, you're live, Paul. Try again.
Yes.
Yes, there he is.
All right.
You and I are muting each other.
Maureen?
Yes, and Kaylee, thank you for the tip.
Say Deb, yes.
Yes. Erin?
Yes.
All right. Onto my next screen. Already did Dina, already did Linda. Paul, missing Tina.
Yeah, yes.
And did we lose Paul Goldner?
He's there.
Oh, no, there he is. Paul Goldner?
Yes.
Thank you. All right. Continued payment of contracted services such as transportation and tuitions, Brian?
Yes, so I don't, I will let Kyle chime in here, but so as of, well, I'll let Kyle chime in because I don't think we're in a place where we're ready to ask for a vote yet.
Right. So a couple different areas here, but one underlying theme is that there's a section of Mass General Law which dictates we cannot pay vendors when services are not incurred. A perfect example of this is transportation. So since schools have been closed, they have not been running the buses. So because of that, services aren't being rendered. Legally, we cannot pay them. There's also a section in our contract with NRT Bus that specifically states the district will not pay for days when buses are not running. The problem with this is, and it's been all these a number of these conversations I've been having at the state level, is that if we don't pay, if the bus vendors don't receive payment, they have to lay off all of their employees just to sustain themselves from a business perspective. NRT Bus, speaking with John McCarthy, their CEO, they have kept all of their drivers on the payroll at this point in time. We've been having conversations with them. Brian and I had a conversation, and then there was also a roundtable group with a number of other business administrators and John McCarthy where we had a similar type conversation. And he outlined what his costs were, what the outlook was like, and what the repercussions would be if he was not paid. The state has also come down and said that they strongly recommend to continue paying these vendors, and the spider web or the snowball effect of layoffs and how that would the impact it'd have on the unemployment system as well. Anyway, long story short, it would be to our benefit to continue paying them, however, at a reduced rate, because there's certain costs that they are not incurring during these closures. Fuel costs being one of them, number one. And talking with John McCarthy over at NRT, his initial proposal was that he outlined fuel costs are typically 2% of the rate, and then they build in a 3% profit rate into the contract as well. His proposal was that we pay all home to school costs, continue paying those. And then for other transportation costs like athletics, field trips, we wouldn't be on the hook for those. So wanted to get your input on this to see if you would be agreeable to us amend. What we would have to do to legally pay these bills going forward is we'd have to develop a contract amendment because the language in our existing contract specifically says we can't pay them if services aren't incurred. So we would have to develop that and would like to get your input or thoughts.
All right. Do you want to talk about transportation separately from tuitions? Or
Yeah, sorry, kind of went on a roll there. So yeah, two very different, similar but different topics. So transportation being one, like I just outlined, and then special ed tuitions are another area. That can be broken down into collaboratives and private day schools. Collaboratives are, Brian, you might be able to word it better than me, but they're very much an extension of Triton. So because
Exactly
of that, we're more obligated to pay the full scope of costs. So our thought in talking with local officials as well as state officials is that it would be prudent to pay the full bills for those collaboratives. With the private out of district, slightly different. Some of these are for-profit entities, so they have. I don't want to go there, say too much, but
other means.
Yes, yes. So the thought process being that maybe we try and negotiate down a price a little bit. If what costs are they truly incurring during closures if students aren't in the building? Is there any savings that can be passed on to Triton?
So I would say the other further clarification is for special education transportation, we're not confirmed with that either. So we don't know specifically, but we have to clarify whether that was part of that original proposal to come off 5% or not, or if it's more than that or less than that. So
right, and to that point too, our I'll call it regular ed transportation, our standard transportation is developed on the 180-day cycle. So it's very clear that we're going to be running 23 buses a day for 180 days. If there's snow days, those have to get made up at the end. So we're on it's clear cut what the costs are. Whereas special education transportation is on a per run, per child transported cost basis. So those can and do fluctuate on a month-to-month basis. So we'd have to see if that discount would apply to those, as well as what a good basis would be for developing the costs for April, May, and June, or the duration of the closures.
Okay, thank you. Paulise, I see a hand over there.
So, Brian, I thought there was earlier discussion about the food packages being delivered via the buses.
Yep. So they are, but we're only using 5 of the 24 buses. So there's 23 2-tier and 1 single-tier bus. So we only need 5 of the run. So part of the discussion is what happened in March, and we're negotiating, so we don't want to play all the cards here. But part of the discussion is what happened in March. Those first 2 weeks in March, those are anomaly, right? We'll call that state of emergency. So we're trying to figure out, obviously, as a business, NRT with something like 4,300 vehicles on the road, they need cash, right? Or the burn rate's going to hit pretty quick. So we're trying to figure out what makes sense to pay through March, and then anything for the month of April, and then if it continues in May and June, renegotiate the contract and have those rates in play. But absolutely, yeah. So there are buses running, but only 5 of the 24. I was going to say Deb has a digital hand raised and Linda has a real one raised.
Does she? Okay. Deb, go ahead.
I figured out how to raise my hand digitally. At the beginning, Kyle, didn't you say that we didn't have to make this decision tonight? Did you say that about the buses?
We don't.
Yes, we don't want to vote on this one tonight. We would love feedback from you on your thoughts on our approach.
Well, I personally would like to see numbers before I gave a lot of feedback. What are the options? You said that, I know, because I think at Finance Subcommittee, we talked about the fuel cost piece of it, but not with any numbers in front of us.
Right.
So I think that maybe by our Finance Subcommittee meeting is the 29th. I don't know what the date would be that you'd have to have us take a vote on that.
Okay.
But I would like to see some numbers as to what the cost of the fuel would be and what the other variables would be.
I can develop a more in-depth schedule for sure. Some numbers just offhand are standard bus routes based on the 180-day schedule. They come up with the total cost and then they split that amongst 10 months. So we pay 10 even bills throughout the school year. That comes to $140,328 per month. So if we were to take 5% of that, it would be a savings of $7,000 for just that one. For late buses, it's another type of transportation. That's a home to school that they're chatting about. They'd like us to continue to pay. That's $4,300 a month. And then we look at, I just pulled the March bills for special ed in district and special ed out of district. Special ed in district was $28,782. Special ed out of district was $70,742. Some types, again, some more information there. NRT provides mail courier service for us. That's typically $990 a month. We would not pay any of that. Athletic for the month of March was $1,230. That varies from month to month, but we would not pay that either.
There'll be some significant savings in April and May for athletics because March is actually bumper season between seasons. So
correct.
The more significant costs of, I don't know if you've got that there, Kyle, I mean, 30, 40,000, those would not be incurred in April and May. But so I guess my request in the thought of bringing it up today, again, is not for a vote, but there are school committees taking very hard stands and very hard lines with this. And as a general group, the 9 of you have always said, you know what, let's hear from the administration. We trust the approach. But before we went down the road of negotiating a contract that ultimately you would need to sign because it's an amendment on the 5-year agreement, I think we just wanted to make sure that we're not, that you're not interested in taking a more hard stand to say, no, if the services weren't delivered, then we're not paying the bills. So it's, again, I would not recommend that to you because of what that does to unemployment and what that does to the workforce when we do start rolling the buses again. We want NRT to be in existence and we want our drivers back. So if those folks disappear and he claims that we violated the contract, that puts us in a very bad situation. So we're going to continue to negotiate to make sure that we're comfortable that we're paying him the costs and he's not benefiting, at our expense. But we just wanted to make sure the approach that we're taking makes sense to you all.
And I would like to highlight real quick, if I may, too, another provision of an amendment we're discussing with them is that if down the line NRT bus receives any federal incentives through keeping their employees employed, whether it's a tax credit or some other program, that program would be, those funds would be passed back to Triton, one for dollar. And he was agreeable to that as we've been chatting, having conversations with him.
I just have one comment or one question in regard to the late buses, Kyle. I believe you said that they would still expect payment for those since it's home to school. I would like to see some negotiation on that part because that isn't really a large amount of students, especially given that we're not running those buses 5 days a week. So if we could kind of push back on that part, I mean, I do agree that, as Brian pointed out, we need to think of long-term unemployment. We do want our drivers back once we get out of this closure, but I think that there should be some special consideration given to late buses.
Okay.
I would just say that in discussion, so for late, so any school to, I think that was the term he used, school to home, right?
Correct.
So that's before and end of the, beginning and end of day, midday kindergarten, and late runs. All of those are into the bank of hours that drivers get, right? So you're assigned, I'm making this up, you're bus one, and then you do the late runs on Tuesdays and Thursdays. That goes into your rotation of hours, and that's your schedule. So the reason behind home to school was that's the piece that he's keeping whole in paying employees, is all of those hours for regular day. If drivers then choose to do charters, which technically all of the athletics, field trips, all that's all extra that he's not going to pay drivers because that's extra. I don't know what the right term is. They kind of bid for those jobs and say, I want to take that trip. But all regular day is guaranteed pay for them.
So that includes those late buses then? I didn't realize that.
Yep.
Okay, then
Yep.
that's a different situation. Thank
I
you for the
still don't disagree with you, and I still want to push on that, but listening to him, the explanation made sense.
It does. Thank you.
Linda?
I don't have anything to ask now because Kyle answered it, because I was wondering if there was any federal kickback, if we would be getting money back for that, as well as I was concerned with NRT losing drivers if they were to lay off all those drivers. So that was all I was gonna. I'm leaving it up to the administration, as I feel that they're better suited to decide what we should do than I would be.
And on the federal grant piece, I see a question in the chat, Erin, the small business grant. NRT does not qualify for that program because they have greater than 500 employees. However, the tax credits that they're pursuing are all relative to that same $2 trillion. However, it's a separate program.
Just a comment, just in case any legislative bills come out to benefit the bus drivers. That's what I was thinking, like not so much a grant, but if later on down the road, somebody puts the bill in to help the bus drivers.
That would definitely be part of any negotiations, that any of those tax credits, mostly for a private business, would come through as a tax credit because he wouldn't qualify for the loan. So that's a good point, Linda. Those are the pieces that will make sure he's not working away with more money than he would have received. You've got Erin and Maureen have hands raised. Narissa.
Yes. Okay. Erin first.
Can you tell us if we make an addendum to this to be able to pay them, what does it do for our contract that we just negotiated for the next term?
It would be separate from that. So it would be relative to only the contract this year. And then it would have language in the addendum to say that it's specifically related to COVID-19 closures.
And they wouldn't try and put that clause in the next contract?
Correct. We want to make sure any addendum we'd have to the contract, we'd make sure to look at those type of things, and then we'd have our attorneys review it as well to make sure it's not opening us up to any sort of exposure, like just like you mentioned. Very good point.
Well, and anything that would be in this addendum to the contract is going to pay him less money. So he's not going to want to continue anything that will be in this contract. He's going to want to wrap this up. We would love to continue these rates into next year and not have the $140,000 increase. But so we can take that angle. Kyle, write that down. We're going to try that approach. But yeah, I think he wants to wrap this up and move on. So,
Maureen?
Okay, sorry. Yeah, I just wanted to just sort of piggyback on Linda. I agree with what Linda said and what Deb said. I don't think it's right to take a hard stand on this right now, and especially in these uncertain times. And I just think that we should see what our administrators feel is best moving forward.
Any other comments from the committee? So I have, I guess, a comment and a couple of questions, Kyle. Which other districts are in the kind of working group with you? And I assume is it Jay Sullivan that's working with you on the state side?
So Jay Sullivan on the state side facilitated these working groups, and what they did is they polled all of the districts in Massachusetts to say, who are your our transportation providers for both standard transportation as well as in-district and out-of-district special ed transportation. For us at Triton, we use the same vendor, NRT. So from there, they developed a list of who are all the communities using NRT for transportation. And then from that working group, there were, I can't remember how many, offhand a number, but then on the call the other day, there were 10 of us. Local communities as well. North Andover was on there. Haverhill uses NRT as well. Reading, I believe. I could get the list for sure.
Okay, it's not a big deal. I guess the sense I was trying to get is how big of a group were we in, and are all the districts kind of on the same page? I guess, knowing that list, what happens if Haverhill takes a hard line, but then we're saying, let's take a kind of softer stance on this one.
Right. So to your point, there's the risk that we say, what if we decide to pay them the proposed 5% discount and nobody else does, and then they go out of business, and then we've suffered financially because of that. Certainly there is that risk. I can't speak for every district because I think each of the school committees might have different positions, but the sentiment across the state is the same, that they need to be, the repercussions of not paying these vendors are significant, and the financial burden that would be passed on to the district in future years would be significant as well. So it's more, that seems to be the general sentiment.
Yeah, I think Jay's hope in organizing this was that anyone who works with NRT or anyone who works with, I guess Tremblay is now NRT, or any of these other companies, Salter or First Student, that they're collaborating, and so there's one amendment that everyone's going to agree to. Again, obviously every committee gets to negotiate their own contract, but I think the spirit was hopefully that someone doesn't get a 10% discount when everyone else gets 5%.
Right, and to that, NRT is absolutely consistent on what they're proposing for every single one of their districts, is that it's the 5%.
Okay. And what would be the duration of this contract?
It would be for the term of the COVID-19, the duration of the COVID-19 closures.
Closure. Okay.
It would end at the final day of the school year this year.
Okay.
So we're in year 5 of a 5-year contract. We start a new contract this summer for next school year in the 5 years. So this adjusts any costs during during the closure through the end of the year. So if we come back, obviously we don't get discount. If we stay out, we get discount.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. And is there a stipulation in, or would there be a stipulation in this agreement that they would have to keep their employees on?
I would think that, yes. Brian, your thoughts? I would
Yeah, so just
expect
to
that
clarify,
because we wouldn't want to, they're talking with them, their salaries are 55% of their total cost.
Yeah.
So if all of a sudden they stop paying, that would affect our so anyway, long story
Yeah.
short, absolutely.
yeah, so we don't have a draft contract yet, right? So now the discussions are happening that will draft. And so I think it's actually, I think Jay was going to be involved in even helping draft that using DESI counsel rather than us paying for that. So I think, so yes, absolutely. If we're paying, part of the reason we're paying is to make sure buses and people are still there. So unequivocally, yes.
Yeah.
Even if the boilerplate contract didn't have it, we would amend that and absolutely would have that as a requirement. Yes.
Okay. So I guess a couple of thoughts. I would also like to see us get a little bit more than what you're talking about here. I feel like this is the beginning of the negotiation, probably not the end of the negotiation. And I would like to see, obviously nobody wants NRT to go out of business because, as you pointed out, we do need them. But I think this is, it's a relatively small amount of relief for that they're offering right now. And then my second concern, which I think is the bigger one, is on having it for the duration of the closure, given that we don't know what's going to happen for the duration of the closure and where our budget is going. I think I've said before, we don't want to be in a situation where we're killing the institution for a few individuals, right? We're steering the ship. And if we end up in a situation where we're really in financial trouble as we come to the end of fiscal 20, we need to save as many individuals as possible and not have, made promises along the way. And my concern is what happens if we end up in, for instance, the beginning of June, and we're finding ourselves in really hot water. And then we have this contract that says that we've agreed to pay, X amount to NRT, but we're having to make really tough decisions internally. In the district. I'm hesitant to say go the length of the closure because I feel like we need to be able to take this in stages, given that we don't know what's going to happen as things continue. And I have concerns, I guess, about it going for that full duration.
Yeah, and I agree. That makes a lot of sense. Similar to how you just took a vote to pay teachers through the current closure of May 5th. Would it make sense, in your opinion, to negotiate through the currently known?
Yeah,
closure?
I mean,
That type of
I
thing,
would
and then
feel much more
revisit.
comfortable
Yeah, it makes sense.
taking it in a much smaller chunk. I just fear what happens if we write this through, June 30th, and then,
Right.
or, whatever the day is, and then finances change a lot. And we already know that we're paying out more for certain funds than we normally would, the meals, things like that aren't, going to be, we don't have the revenues coming in to kind of offset that. So knowing that those things are going to continue to change, I just hesitate to sign up for something that long, knowing that we may have to make strategic decisions and sacrifices down the road.
No, that makes sense. Brian, I don't know if you have any comment.
Yeah, I was going to say, I agree. I don't think there's a way to keep negotiating the contract, right? I think there needs to be a discussion about the costs. If we can commit in chunks, that's a different thing, right? So if there's a draft contract and we write it through May 4th, and then we write it again through June 4th, or whatever, whatever segments, that may be a possibility. But I don't think we're going to be in a situation where, unlike calling an emergency meeting of the school committee to solve an issue and have a discussion about something, it's a little different if we're collectively negotiating a contract that's for all NRT contracts. So I just think it's a bigger discussion. It's going to take a while to get there. So I don't think that'll be all right. Let's negotiate for 4 weeks and then come back to the table. Versus how can we negotiate it in full and agree it in chunks? What I guess is probably the way I think it would only be feasible.
Yeah.
So
I mean, I guess I agree with that. Do your negotiations up front, but know that hopefully there would be no need to come back to a negotiating table, but if there are extenuating circumstances for the districts involved, then that may be what has to happen. I just don't see how we can say to our staff, we're only, saying definitely that we're going to pay you through May 4th. And then we're saying to NRT staff, yep, we've got you covered through June 30th. It doesn't feel right to me.
Yep. I agree.
Me as well.
Yep.
Any other comments or questions on this one? And any other, Linda? Linda, can you?
Yes, I am muted.
There you go.
Brian, I just have a question for you. Being on this call with these other districts, is there a sense to the state of how limited amount of buses that there really are to choose from?
Sorry, did you say that question was for me as well?
Either one of you. I know that you
Okay.
guys were on a call and you guys were talking about the different bus companies that are out there in the state. Has this kind of brought anything to light of how limited amount of bus companies there are to choose?
I mean, I think it kind of puts an exclamation point on the concept of collusion, right? And there's the issue of the number of companies and then the number of bids we get. So I think this is one more example of that being an issue. But it is a real challenge in that if we wanted to play hardball with NRT and they walk away and say, okay, fine, we don't have a contract anymore. If you're not paying, we don't have a contract. There's nothing to continue with. We technically have a contract for next year, but if they were to walk away and then we opened up June 1st, there is not another company likely that could come in and provide buses and drivers on a week's notice, 2 weeks notice. When someone's bidding on a job, ideally they're doing it in November before the start of a September school year, or at the worst case scenario, January, February, because it takes 6 months to ramp up your operation, your vehicles, your drivers, and get everything in place. So I think yes, it accentuates a problem, but I do believe it is not a good scenario for us to force the hand here. We don't win as far as the continuity of services.
Can I just say, Brian, Linda, to your question directly, now granted, I haven't been involved with MASC this year at all, but in the past several years prior to this, the MASC Regional Schools Committee was trying to push this issue directly to exactly your point. There are not enough bus companies to be competitive so that we can help to lower our costs. The state is well aware of it, but so far as I know, nothing's happening.
So, and that
Not a
was
good answer, I know.
Well, Nat Ellen Holmes was
Yes.
present at every one of the big long title, but the Educational Transportation Efficiencies Commission that I was on. And when our report was produced in December, it was never produced in December. So there's a report due out in December and it's now April and we haven't seen that, but that was the number one topic. The number one concern was just the lack of competition and how that drives prices. So yes.
Exactly.
And no remedy found.
Any other comments?
I guess I would say, I think that's helpful feedback for us in regards to, the continuing of, so again, just to confirm, definitely paying collaborative tuitions, going to pay something for regular transportation, still working on special ed transportation and private day placements.
Yeah. Okay.
So no vote there. So then the other piece was refunds for preschool, kindergarten, and kids club. So again, we had the discussion already. Obviously, and you all agreed, felt strongly that we can't be charging tuitions for a tuition-based program and not providing a service. So education, we're doing our best to provide schooling, full day kindergarten, obviously preschool, we're providing an experience, but I think that the experience we're providing is not not what parents paid for a full day for, or for preschool for. So we had already had the discussion, and you were all fully supportive of us refunding those tuitions. That started, that's in process. Kyle notified everyone, and the default was anything you've paid is a credit for future months. If you want a refund, please contact us, and certainly people are contacting Kyle and Sue to get refunded. And I assume there will be some people who will be okay not taking their refunds back, which will help the district as well. So I don't know if there's an update on that, Kyle, or if there's anything specific you wanted to add there.
Nope. So that's held pretty consistent. Like Brian mentioned, we've had a number of people by default. This was set up to any tuitions paid in advance or any for the current duration of the closures that would be available for a refund via a credit, so to be used against future billings. We have had a number of people request that a check be issued. So we're gathering that information and putting it, getting payment over to them as soon as possible.
Kyle, do you know approximately how much you've paid so far in refunds?
So this week, there's for people who have requested the check be issued directly back to them, it was about 10,000, right around there.
Thank you.
Tina?
Yeah, I hadn't asked this question before, but now that I'm sort of in the trenches with my kindergartner, I feel like the kindergarten team at Pine Grove has been doing a really excellent job and has been working really hard. So after the fact, I'm a little conflicted about this decision. How is this going to affect the kindergarten teachers and teams?
It doesn't.
Okay.
So it's a cost like food services. So it doesn't change their pay. You earlier took a vote, and what we had already put in place was all full and part-time employees remain getting their base pay. And just to clarify, in case there's any concern, that doesn't mean stipends or overtime or random things people did here and there, but everyone's base pay. So all the kindergarten teachers, the instructional assistants, any special educators, they're getting their full pay as they normally would, which means that when we're refunding, we're creating another deficit. But in those accounts, some of them had balances that from carryover that will help offset. But I think this is the piece where we're assuming savings in another area. And we've had the discussion in, I guess it was late March with the finance subcommittee. When we have another discussion into this month, it's going to be much clearer. And I think at the end of this month, we'll know whether or not we're opening May 4th. And be in a much better place to say, okay, here's the impact. We know the impact of refunding or not asking parents to pay any pre-KK or kids club fees. So now it's a matter of, if that becomes unsustainable, then we would need to take action in regards to whether we're paying those folks. Again, right now, I'm not in a place to say that we need to not continue that practice, but that's what we would do beyond today.
Right. I just want to say too that the kindergarten team has been doing an excellent job and keeping our kindergartners busy. So I just wanted to make that shout out.
Absolutely.
Maureen?
Brian, I know it's not included on this refund line, but is there any thought about the spring athletic fees that have been paid by high school and middle school families for the spring sports? Yeah.
So it's not on there, but it's on my notes. So that was the piece I was going to say. So we're not going to ask you to take any action on that tonight because, again, I feel like everything hinges on May 4th, which is frustrating, I know, for everyone, including Kaylee sitting there as a student. So as of right now, the MIAA has a completely revised spring schedule that occurs between May 4th and I think the last tournament ends like on June 30th. So the idea would be, it would be a somewhat condensed, but I would call it a very intense season. So there's certainly things that are going on. We've had some discussions about even partial payments for coaches, because all of the spring coaches are doing work with their athletes. They're, obviously not getting together to practice, but communicating about, drills and skills and about conditioning. So I don't think we'll be in a place, if nothing happens and we're not collecting fees, then maybe a partial payment. But if a season happens, we would not do refunds, and coaches would receive their stipends in full. So I'm well, again, I don't know where I am, but it all hinges on May 4th. I think if we go past May 4th, any kind of season becomes impossible beyond that. So we'll know more as we get to May 4th. So at this point, we're saying hold on that. We have not done any issuing of refunds for athletics, and I've worked with Tim Alberts, the athletic director, to just communicate with that with coaches and families.
Any other questions or comments on fees?
Oh, Paul's got a real hand raised.
Yeah,
Sorry.
I see his real hand.
Nice.
Go ahead, Paul.
Brian, what time of the year do the coaches actually get paid, like for spring season? They get paid at the end of the season or the beginning, or?
They get paid at the end. So it's usually, around the holidays for the fall, they literally just got paid before the break, or before the closure, not the break, for the winter season. And then they'll get paid in May, end of May, beginning of June. Yeah. Yep. And that's typical, right? There's not payments throughout the season. It's a stipended position. So that's fully paid at the end of the season.
Any other questions on fees?
So I would request, again, similar to the pay and all that, if you want to take a motion to continue to refund fees for preschool, full day kindergarten, and kids club for all days of the closure. And I guess at this point, it probably makes sense to do the same thing and do it through May 4th.
Okay, yeah. Okay, can I get a motion to refund preschool, full day kindergarten, and kids club tuitions and fees for all days of the closure through May 4th, please?
So moved.
Right. Second, anybody?
I think Linda seconded.
Linda seconded?
She did. I heard it, I swear.
All right. Any further discussion on this? All right.
Can I ask a question? Actually, I'm going to ask Kyle. As I'm now suggesting we do that through May 4th. Does that? I feel like that's a little different. Is our mindset going to change if whether or not, if we got to layoffs in June? I don't think we'd be still suggesting that we're going to charge parents. Right. I feel like whether we pay employees has to do with our financial standing, whether we're paying contracts for services not delivered. I guess my question is your view as a committee of 9 going to change if we're still not in school on June 1st? Would you ever switch and say, you know what, I think we are going to start charging you tuition even though you're not here? So I guess after I said through May 4th, I'm now thinking that I think back to use Dina's term, that through the duration of the closure, any days that we're not in school for the closure, that we would refund fees and tuitions for those days, I think is an okay vote, and that puts this to bed.
Okay.
If you would accept that friendly amendment.
Yes. So I'm actually going to remove the original motion from the table then. And can I get a new motion to refund families for tuition-based programs, including preschool, full day kindergarten, and kids club for all days of the closure?
So moved.
Second it.
Seconded. Thank you. Any further discussion on that? All right. I need a roll call vote, please. Paul Lees?
Yes.
Thank you. Maureen Heffernan?
Yes.
Tina?
I'm going to abstain.
Okay. Deb?
Yes.
Aaron?
Yes.
Paul Goldner?
Yes.
Aaron?
Yes. Sorry, I thought you had already called me.
Maybe I did. Sorry. The pictures move around. Dina?
Yes.
Linda?
Yes.
All right. And I think that's it. And I'm a yes too. So, all right. So we've got approval and 8-0 to 1, I guess, approval, 1 abstention. Anything further under the COVID-19 item, Brian?
I don't believe so. I think I just looked down. I can't believe it's 9:42.
I know. I'm going to come to that in a second.
I don't believe no, I don't believe there's anything else we need to talk about tonight.
Okay, so just to kind of go through this item real quick, are you going to put a communication out about April vacation and
will.
the school year? Okay, both to families and high school students?
Yes, yep. And just so you know, so the communication will say, I mean, I have to note that currently that puts the current last day of school on Tuesday the 16th. So you didn't vote that and it's not official, but
Right.
technically what you did pulls it back to Tuesday the 16th. So yes, we'll absolutely communicate that.
Can we note along with that that date may change down the
Absolutely.
road?
Yep. You know, I think with anything, as we continue to go through here, you know, go through the closure and unanticipated things that will continue to be flexible. Absolutely.
Okay. And then obviously we're already handling refunds. Kyle's got transportation and tuitions with those discussions. And I'm assuming have employees already been notified that they're being paid through I guess,
yep.
Whatever communication that is, or just
Yep.
make sure.
Yep. So I would say we would, if we got to the point where we weren't paying them or we anticipated that we might change, I would notify them again. But I think if we were to notify folks about now you're officially paid through the 4th, that would confuse people and make people worry. Versus, you know, it's been very clear that at this point we fully anticipate, unless you hear otherwise, that we will be paying you throughout the closure.
Okay.
Yep.
All right, excellent. Given that we are at 9:45, I was going to suggest, unless Kyle or Brian has an objection, that we move the audit presentation. So I had emailed 6 of you who could actually attend it about holding a meeting to discuss the TRTA contract on the 16th. So my question would be, in that we have to be in open session for that anyway initially, and then move into an executive session for the discussion, would everyone be open to putting the audit presentation into the open session piece of that meeting?
That sounds like a good idea.
Just so that we can move it.
What time?
Fine with me.
It's at 7 p.m. on the 16th.
So what time would we?
We would do this in open session first. So we'd open the session, discuss the audit presentation, and then they would move into executive session. The 6 members that could, along with Neil Harrington, Brian, Kyle, and
Kim.
Yeah, and then just those members could come back to open session in order to wrap that up. Does that make sense? And can everybody do that? Okay, Kyle, any objections to that?
No, that's absolutely fine by me.
Okay,
My feelings
I'm sure
aren't hurt.
you spent hours preparing, but
He's got it streamlined into a finely tuned
I'm sure he does. Just not
5
me.
minute.
5 minutes that I would prefer to be right now, so that we can keep moving. So I think superintendent evaluation is a really quick one. So Ryan, do you want to hit that one?
Sure. Yep. I don't know if anyone from the PNN wants to talk about it specifically, but so this is the same tool that we use. Hopefully you had a chance to click on the link there and take a look at it. So this is the same tool we used last year. There was some suggestions about some, I think it was light on standard 1 or standard 2, Dina, the operations standard. Very heavy on the kind of the leadership piece. So Dina and I spent a lot of time going through this and tweaking and moving questions around. So ultimately, this is, again, doesn't look entirely different than what you saw from my evaluation last year, but it's an amended tool. So I think first and foremost, it's bringing it to the full committee, and it sounds like the PNN, it was, the tweaks were not significant, and so everyone felt like it made sense to just bring it right to the full committee for a discussion and a review and at least a vote to use that this year. I think it's perfect timing to have an online survey tool as our evaluation for the or your evaluation for me, because when we get to that point, maybe we have some slightly altered expectations about what I can produce for evidence and all of that, but it's a perfectly streamlined tool to use in a remote scenario. So yeah, I don't know if Dina, Paul, or you want to chime in.
I would just like to say that we did spend a lot of time on this. I think what I didn't like about last year's evaluation was that it was not from a school committee member's point of view. As I
Mm.
recall, it was more based on administrators evaluating each other. So what I did and what I met with Brian about is I went through all the rubrics for the superintendent evaluation, went through all the standards, went through the indicators, pulled out the ones that I thought we were looking for based on past evaluation tools we have used and just in discussions between Brian and I. And then we went through that a couple of times at least to kind of fine tune and to balance out those standards, because I agree at one point we were high or heavy on leadership and light on operations and things. So we kind of balanced out the tool itself, and I'm very happy with how it turned out.
I would just add in a big thank you to Dina for doing all that work, and of course, Brian as well.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any other comments or questions on this? I don't see any hands, real or virtual. It is very comprehensive, so thank you all for your work on this, because I can imagine the hours that must have gone into it. Can I get a motion to approve the updated tool for the evaluation of the superintendent of schools to be used for the summative evaluation for the 2019-2020 school year?
So moved.
I'll second.
All right, excellent. Any further discussion? All right, I need a roll call vote. So Dina?
Yes.
Paul? Lise?
Yes.
Maureen?
I vote yes, but I think Paul Goldner was trying to raise his hand.
Oh, I'm sorry, I missed that.
You just say it looked awesome. Thank you for your work.
Excellent, thank you.
Well, I'm glad we took the time for that comment. Thank you, Paul.
Me too.
Yeah.
Yes.
Erin?
Yes.
All right. What else am I missing? Linda?
Yes.
Tina?
Yes.
And Paul Goldner, did you actually say yes, or did you?
I did.
Okay, excellent. And I'm a yes as well, so it's unanimous. Anything else you need from us on that, Brian? I know we're gonna have to revisit this down the road just because it, depending on what happens with the closure.
Yeah, I would say, if there's anything specific that you want to take action on, but I fully intend to still be evaluated as usual. And I think when we get to, usually I'd be submitting evidence to you, I forget the timeline, in May, and then you have it back in June. So I still think we have that timeline, and I think just you could be understanding that probably the evidence process will be a little different than usual, but certainly still a tool that works. So no, I think we're good. Thank you.
All right.
Well, can I just say too, the beauty of this evaluation is that it does place more emphasis on your goals, which you already gave us your mid-cycle. So we already have quite a bit of it. So it would just be a brief update, I would imagine, as to what's happened since then. So I'm not anticipating a lot of artifacts that need to be produced either.
Yeah. Perfect.
I like that.
All right. Moving on to item D, the regional agreement. So I cannot believe I am saying this, that after, I don't know how many years, going back, what did we say, Dina? You've been working on this for 7 years, something like that? Yes.
Yes, at least.
We're not done, but we've hit the point where we can take the official vote. DESE has given us their blessing on the version that is in your packet. There are actually two versions in there. One is the clean version. That would be the actual new agreement, should it be approved by the towns. And the other one is the red line version, so you can see exactly what changed between 2006 and this current version. Just one, well, I guess two different notes. One, you might remember if you've been kind of following this conversation that Raleigh's Town Council had brought up new language about the incurring of debt. That was in addition to the standard kind of boilerplate regional agreement incurring of debt language that DESE had suggested. DESE's legal reviewed that and actually approved it. So that will be included in the final contract or the final agreement that's going to the vote. We did have to remove the language about agreeing from time to time about maintenance and upkeep on the elementary school buildings. DESE had concerns about that. I'm not going to go through it right now since we had tons of conversation on this during the DCC. If you haven't watched it, or if you want to discuss it right now, we can definitely do that. But that was removed. Either we had to add quite a bit of language about cost apportionment, potential cost apportionment for something that would likely not even happen, or we had to remove that language. And in talking to the towns, their preference was to remove that language. They didn't feel comfortable with adding additional apportionment language at this point. And then the other thing that is directly school committee related is there was a stipulation in there that we would elect our school committee secretary. And in going back to Mass General Law, it actually turns out that we need to appoint our school committee secretary. So you'll note that there are some changes in there that were just recently made. They're a direct match to Mass General Law that basically says that we elect by ballot our chair and vice chair, that we appoint on an annual basis our secretary, and we appoint on an annual basis or by a multi-year contract our treasurer for the district. So those are the most recent big changes. So if I can get a motion to approve the amended Triton Regional Agreement as presented to be sent to the towns for the spring 2020 town meetings, I would appreciate it.
Narissa, before we do that, can I just say, I mean, I reviewed the whole thing, especially the clean copy. I didn't find any issues, except there were some, where chairperson was capitalized in one place, not another. I don't know if you want those corrections or not, but other than that, it looks good.
So yes. So I would love to if it was before now, but we need to vote it tonight to get it to the towns in time for town meetings. So.
Okay. So, well,
given that
I didn't.
If you take a vote, I mean, we can correct grammar and capitalization.
Okay.
That's not,
Right.
I mean, absolutely.
That's all it is. It's nothing substantial.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, if you get the red tabbed version, Dina, is it color tabs?
Sort of.
Excellent. But yeah, we can totally, as long as you're not making, true changes, we can.
No,
correct grammar.
nothing has changed. It's just for consistency.
Yep.
Perfect.
Yep.
Okay.
Dina, you have to make the motion. After 15 years of this,
Yes, I
this
make
has
the
to be your motion.
That's true.
And I'll
I make
second
the
it.
motion.
All right. Got a motion seconded. Any further discussion on this? All right. I need a roll call vote. Dina?
Yes.
Linda?
Yes.
Maureen?
Yes, and yay.
Paul Goldner?
Semi-emphatic. 10 o'clock emphatic.
Deb Choate?
Yes.
Aaron?
Yes.
All right. Who do I have here? I already got Linda. Paulise?
Yes.
Tina?
Yes.
And I am a yes, too. All right. So that's a unanimous vote. Moving on to real quick to subcommittee reports and action items. Policy and advocacy, Linda?
We did not meet because today was Passover, but we will be meeting in May.
Yes. All right. Thank you. Finance, Deb? Deb? Deb's gone.
There we go. Sorry. By the time we get I get the hang of this, we probably won't need it anymore. But we met and just different, when we talked about the year-to-date expenditure report, there would be some potential savings, but then when we get to the revolving accounts report, there will be some not so much savings. And we at some point are going to need to talk about whether or not we're going to use excess efficiency. And I guess we'll have our audit report next month.
It'll be next Thursday. So
Oh, well, that's
we'll move
right. I'm
that
sorry. I forgot.
16th.
Next Thursday.
Yeah, so just
So,
on the timing of E&D, so we have to have a 45-day window before June 30th. So it's, we can use the April Finance Subcommittee meeting and then take a vote at the May 13th meeting, and that gives Amy Posick 48 hours to certify it and still give the towns their 45 days. So we're pushing it to the last minute just so that we can have a better assessment of the number we need
Yeah.
to use.
Again, much of what we've already talked about tonight was discussed. in the,
Was finance subcommittee stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm hopeful there will be legislation too. That's definitely been a hot topic. So towns are potentially going to be allowed to use their free cash past July 1, which they traditionally can't do. And same thing, we haven't been able to use E&D past July 1. It essentially evaporates and then has to be recertified before we can use it. And there's the potential on the state level to allow use of those funds past June 30th, which I would be hopeful that would happen sooner than later, so that if we're not in a position where we know we have to use it, we don't necessarily need to tap it straight off. We could at least have a longer runway to see where we're at as we get later on in the fiscal year and make a decision then.
And just one point to make on that, and this, I wanted to, what's the word I'm looking for? Remember, sorry, it's 10 o'clock. So Kyle had mentioned, so there is special legislation now that allows us to amortize any losses over 3 years. So that's a technical thing. It doesn't help necessarily with cash flow, but just so you're aware, there are lots of structures in place that, when we come back to the discussion with the finance subcommittee at the end of April, that we now have some clarification, right? We should hopefully know whether May 4th is real. We know about special legislation that will allow us to extend deadlines, amortize losses. We'll know more about contracts. So it's going to be, we had a good formative discussion in March. We're going to have a much more concrete conversation at the end of April for sure.
And gosh, if we don't know about May 4th by April 29th, this can be a real problem.
Very realistic possibility, quite honestly. I just feel like just the way, I don't know. I'm not expecting anything anymore.
Okay. Personnel negotiations. Paul?
Yeah, so we met with the TRTA yesterday. We continue to make significant progress, and we will fill in the rest of the committee on April 16th. And I don't know if Dina or Maureen has anything to add.
Well, I would,
Just that we're done.
yeah, I would just say more than significant progress. We have a tentative agreement that is being, the language is being ironed out into an MOU that the TRTA president and vice president, Kim and I, will make sure it reflects everything. They'll clear it with their, membership. We'll clear it with the subcommittee to make sure that it accurately reflects everything we agreed to date. And then that's what will come before you next Thursday. So we'll hope to have it all buttoned up by Monday and get that out to you. Obviously that's an executive session, but awesome work by the subcommittee. This is, Camille took a moment to note it, that, there's a lot of committees and unions who were locked up just trying to get things done about the closure. Just about how they're handling breaks and work during the closure. And in the midst of all this, our teachers, no MOU, nothing, stepped up, did the right thing for the closure, and also finalized a 3-year contract. So major win, and certainly the 3 subcommittee members should be proud of the work that they did. So it is good stuff.
Absolutely. Thank you to you all.
Yeah.
We have no correspondence for tonight. And I just want to make a clarification that if you looked at your calendars, we actually had a DCC meeting set for the 16th. We're going to cancel that since we didn't have anything pressing to have to discuss that night. So I'll get that out to the DCC. But in place of that will be that April 16th meeting at 7 p.m.
So just to confirm, so we're going to post it as a 7 o'clock meeting.
Yep.
First agenda item will be the review of the audit. And then it'll go into an executive session to return to open session. The 3 of you ineligible voters will leave. We'll go into executive session, review, make sure everyone's fine, take a vote, come back out and have a vote in public session, right? That's the order?
Yeah, that was my intent.
Perfect.
And if we have something pressing come up in between that needs to be handled by the committee, that's an easy, we got it on our schedule already. We'll add it in there.
I'm sure, just block out till 10 o'clock again. I'm sure there'll be more.
Yeah, I think Debbie and I have the same question about, so that means that the 3 of us will excuse ourselves and then you'll alert us to come back in after the discussion is done.
No, because you can't take the vote. So that's why we'll do the audit first. So you'll be there at 7.
No, we
You'll
can't.
do the
That's
audit
what I was-
piece. Yep. When they go into executive session, you can go home.
We're
Or
done.
Click click, go away. Yeah.
Click, go away.
Yeah. Guess you're already home, so I guess you can't go home.
Motion to adjourn.
Right on.
One quick thing. So, next meeting on the 16th is Dina's, last one. So I hope we have some virtual flowers going on.
It's not.
It's
No?
not.
No.
No.
The elections have been
Renewed?
postponed.
No,
The
Deb
election
and
got-
I still, and
Yeah.
yes, I was just gonna say, Deb and I both have until June after
Yes.
the election, so we still have time. You can't kick us out the door yet.
We
Okay,
got 2 months
All right.
more.
all right.
And actually, I could have swore I heard Dina say the other day at negotiations that it won't be her last. So I don't know. Maybe she's got
Not
surprises.
exactly what I said. No.
I heard that.
That's right. See, Maureen, thank you. Thank you.
Before I take
exactly.
the motion to adjourn, because I know there's itchy trigger fingers on that one, I just wanted to say there's a ton of Kaylee love going on in the chat over here. But I
Yes.
to say it. Thank you, Kaylee, for sticking with us tonight, because I know this is actually a long meeting even for us. And I know it went into directions that you probably had no interest in, but you stuck around for it, and we appreciate that. So
Love it.
thank
Love
you.
it.
So much, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Kaylee.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you all the members for staying here tonight. And now I will take a motion to adjourn, please.
I'll make a motion.
Which motion came first?
I'll
I
second
initially
Deb's
heard Deb.
Deb made a motion, Maureen seconding the
Yes.
motion. Any further
All right.
discussion? I need a roll call vote. So, Dina,
Yes.
Paul Goldner,
Yes, and I think my dog votes yes too.
Oh, I love dogs.
Deb Choate,
Yes.
Maureen,
Yes.
Aaron,
Yes.
Paul Lees,
Yes.
Tina,
Yes.
Linda.
Yes.
I think that's everybody.
Thank you,
I
guys.
vote yes too. I will talk to you all on the 16th. Thank you so much for your time tonight.
Good night. Thank you.
Awesome. Be
Have
well,
a great
everybody.
night, everyone.
Have a great night.
So just so
Thank
you're
you.
aware, this has all been recorded. It'll be on your YouTube channel in a couple days.
Awesome.